day, everyone. So this is for my students in Cor Ad 1. Kaning atong BJMP Comprehensive Operational Manual 2015 edition is the coverage for our final exam. So if you have read the books, half of the provisions of this manual is from chapter 3, pero mostly it's from chapter 4. So ang ato ang ayaw mo kalibog, but our main coverage for our final exam will be the chapter 4 of our Cor Ad 1 book, or the institutional correction. So let's start with the rule 1, or the general provisions. I think most of the sections ninyo naklasihan na ako sa kaning mandate, vision, mission, functions of BJMP. But when it comes to the handling of the prisoners, waya na napoy uban nga waya gadyan na naklasihan. But we will start in rule 1, kaya aron ang inyong chapter 4 is dali ra ninyo masabtan. So let's start with the general provisions of the BJMP. So the Bureau of Jail Management and Penology was created on January 2, 1991 pursuant to the Republic Act 6975. So kabayo na taana na sa ato ang layawan nga ang BJMP along with PNP, BFP was created by the Republic Act 6975, replacing its forerunner, the Jail Management and Penology Service of the defunct Philippine Constabulary Integrated National Police. So ang BJMP exercises administrative and operational jurisdiction over all district, city, and municipal jails. It is a line bureau of the Department of the Interior and Local Government. So always remember that the BJMP is under the Department of Interior and Local Government. Vision: the BJMP envisions itself as a dynamic institution highly regarded for its sustained humane safekeeping and development of inmates. So its mission: the Bureau aims to enhance public safety by providing humane safekeeping and development of inmates in all district, city, and municipal jails. So the BJMP exercises supervision and control over all the district, city, and municipal jails. So cover ni dya tanan jails nga naa sa district nato, sa city, and also the municipalities. As such, it shall ensure the establishment of secure, clean, adequate, equipped sanitary facilities, and ensure the provisions of quality services for the custody, safekeeping, rehabilitation, and development of district, city, and municipal inmates, any fugitive from justice, or person detained awaiting or undergoing investigation or trial, and or transfer to the National Penitentiary, and or violent mentally ill person who endangers him or herself, or the safety of others as certified by the proper medical or health officer pending transfer to a mental institution. So not only naga-supervise siya, naga-ensure sa secure, clean, and adequate equipped sanitary facilities, but also gina-secure niya ang custody, safekeeping, rehabilitation, and development sa tanan district, city, and municipal inmates, pati na tong mga fugitive from justice or katong nagtago, katong mga wanted na tong mga tao, katong gipang detain nato or waiting or naghuyat pa sila or undergoing investigation or trial, or once i-transfer na sila sa National Penitentiary or what we call as prisons under the Bucor, and if they are mentally ill that cause them violent behaviors, so nga maka-endanger not only sa ilang kaugalingon but also sa tanan mga nakapalibot sa ila. So cover pod na gina-supervise ng atong BJMP. So in line with its mission, the Bureau endeavors to perform the following functions. So to enhance and upgrade organizational capability on a regular basis, thus making all BJMP personnel updated on all advancements in law enforcement, eventually resulting in greater crime solution efficiency and decreased inmate population. So mao ni ang function administratively ng atong Bureau of Jail Management and Penology. So of course, they should be updated with the laws, with the advancement of technology. Kay aron masolusyon na nato ang kadaghan nato nga prisoners in the Philippines. Next is to implement strong security measures for the control of inmates. So of course, kay jail man sila, sila ang responsible nga naay custodial function when it comes to our inmates. So dapat sila mag-contain, mag-rehabilitate and treat our inmates in the Philippines. Next is to provide for the basic needs of inmates. So kay naan magdunay basic needs ang atong mga inmates as provided with the Beijing rules, Magna Carta rule for our inmates. Dapat ginahatag sa ila ang ilahang basic human rights. So that includes of course the basic needs of our inmates. Next is to conduct activities for the rehabilitation and development of inmates. So as we all know, ang ato ang main focus, main objective of incarcerating or putting persons into jail is to rehabilitate them, not only to make them suffer with the penalties that we gave them, but also to rehabilitate them, to reform them para mabago sila kay aron inigawas nila sa prisuhan dili na sila maghimo pag-utro ng adto na crime. And then to improve jail facilities and conditions. So dili pwede nga stagnant rang ato ang facility nga ingana nga nagkadaghan ang atong prisoners in the Philippines way ato himuon. So kung dili na kaya ng national, that's why we have our local units kay aron mo tabang na sila in enhancing the prisons facilities of our jails and correctional facilities in the Philippines. So we have the vision, mission, objectives, and functions of Directorate for Operations. So that's not very relevant na with our topic. And then we have our district jail. So in large cities or a group of clustered municipalities, a district jail headed by a district warden may be established. So as we all know, ang atong district jail, it is composed of numbers of municipalities. So kung kana nga jail na adira ang mga prisoners from klase-klase nga municipality in one region, we call that as district jail. And then we have our city and municipal jail. So the BJMP operates and maintains city and municipal jails, each headed by a city or municipal warden. So of course, kung city jail na natay city warden, and then municipal warden kung nana sa municipal jails. So sa Himanggod wala tay city jail na ang naara is municipal jail ra. So kung kana nga kuan nga area is just a municipality and why city, then we won't have a city jail there. So for example, there is sa Surigao, Surigao is a city man, so natay city jail. Pero naman pud tayo sa municipal jails. Next are the core values of the BJMP's officer and staff are guided by the following core values. So maning ang ato ang core values sa BJMP. So they are need to be committed, natay commitment, respect for human rights, efficiency or competence, cooperation, and then we have teamwork. Kaning atong gitawag nga commitment, it is a strong sense of dedication to the ideals of the organization and to the public that it serves. So kung may tag committed ang tawo, dedicated siya sa iyahang trabaho na bisan unsa pay mahitabo inside the jail, bisan pa og naanay riot inside the jail, waya na nagkadiamo administratively bisag na sila problema, they are still committed into their custodial functions inside the jail. Next is the respect for human rights. So, very basic na ni nga. Of course, irespeto nila ang mga inmates tungod kay dili tungod nga nakahimo sila ng saya, boya na ilahang rights dadyon. Ato na dadyon silang tratuhon nga nang dili sakto nga inhumane. Na ato na silang subject to torture. Of course, dili na pwede. Because the main reason why we have jails, it's because we have a respect for human rights. Dili ta gusto nga patyon na largo ang mga tao once makasaya sila, but we need to rehabilitate them and reform them because we believe na they still have chances to change themselves into better ones. So that's why we need to respect them. So mo ni ang gina-uphold pod ng mga personnel in the BJMP. They need to have the respect for every human. And then efficiency/competence, a mastery of important skills for delivery of quality services. So from the moment na mag-apply ang isa ka officer of the BJMP, of course, they will undergo training. Kaya dili ta mo sugot na ang nagabantay sa ato ang mga officers o atong mga inmates or untrained officers or kana ang wala sila kahibaw-anan with the custodial functions, their main functions into securing the inmates and keeping everyone safe inside the jail. So they need to be competent enough in order for them to handle the work perfectly or efficiently and effectively. And then cooperation or the willingness to share efforts in implementing plans and achieving goals. So kung mayroon tag cooperation, of course inside the jail, internal and external nila na at sila cooperation with other agencies, so that ang ato ang mga inmates matagan sila ng saktong proper treatment for their cases. And then teamwork, so the combined effective action of all personnel. So kinahanglan magkasinabot inside the jail ang atong mga personnel kay aron naatay social harmony inside the jail so that ang ato ang mga inmates will also uphold the teamwork also that we want them to have kay aron mas effective ang ilahang pag-rehabilitate. Section 10 is the objectives. So the broad objectives of the Bureau are the following. So to improve the living conditions of offenders in accordance with the accepted standards set by the United Nations, to enhance the safekeeping, rehabilitation, and development of offenders in preparation for their eventual reintegration into the mainstream of society upon the release. So we need to safekeep them, to rehabilitate them, to prepare them para kung kanusa sila mo gawas na prisuhan, so that they will be effective na as a human being outside the jail, so that they will perform their social functions and they will be kanang magamit sila or naa sila'y puwang sa society. And then to professionalize jail services. So that's why we have our manuals, we have operation plans, planning, procedures inside the jail, outside the jail, before the inmate and after the inmate goes to the jail. It's because we want it to be professionalized. Also, gusto nato nga ang ato ang mga personnel should be trained enough to handle these kinds of work. Dali na sa definition of terms. So alcoholics, kung may tag-alcoholics, they suffer from alcoholism. Kadto ang dili na mabuhi kung mayay alcohol sa ilahang lawas. So sometimes ang atong mga inmates are alcoholics, so they may need separate treatment para sa ila to treat their alcohol addiction or dependence. Next is the bisexual, katuning mga tao nga sexually attracted to both males and females. So they are part of the LGBTQIA. So we need to separate them in classification and also diversification. Then we have carpeta. Kung yung tag-carpeta, it is otherwise known as the inmate record or jacket. So this contains the personal and criminal records of inmates, documents related to his or her incarceration, such as but not limited to kaning iyahang commitment order, subpoenas, personal identification, orders from the court, and all other papers necessary connected with detention of the inmate. Kung yung tag-carpeta, mao nang iyahang record niya personally and criminal record niya nga naa sa commitment order, kaning iyahang subpoena, personal identification, orders from the court, and other documents na necessary for his or her detention. So ginatawag na nato nga carpeta or the inmate record or jacket. Then we have the child or youth in conflict with the law or the CICL, also known as the youth offenders. So kadto ni silang mga persons who are under 18 years old who is alleged as, accused of, or adjudged as having committed an offense under the Philippine laws. So dili man na sila usually ginatibo sa mga inmates nato, but they have their separate facility. For example, the Bahay Pag-asa, the receiving homes for the children. So dito na sila ipangbutang. And then we have the chief custodial officer. It is the personnel in charge in the overall supervision of all custodial functions. So kung naatay custodial function inside the jail, of course, ang nag-head ana is our chief custodial officer. So siya ang personal in charge in the overall supervision of all custodial functions. Siya ang chief. And then we have the city jail. So it is a facility or a place of confinement for those inmates who are sentenced with a penalty from 1 day to 3-year imprisonment. So city jail, mutanggap ra na sila og katong mga inmates nato nga naiilahang sentence nga 1 day to 3 years ra of imprisonment. Clustering of jail is the designation of the municipal or city jail as a facility for one or more adjacent municipalities in order to maximize the utilization of personnel and other resources. So the host city or municipality is named as a district to accommodate inmates from the municipalities clustered to it. So, kung may clustering of jails, mahuning katong pagtibo nato sa mga municipalities, and then paghimo nato ng isa ka district jail for all those municipalities, kay aron matibo ra sila. For example, kani nga area na sila tulo ka municipalities, and then gusto nato na maisa ra sila. So that's why we created one district jail for these 3 municipalities, so that dili na magastuhan ka radyo ng building, ng personnel, tungod kay gitibo naman ang tulo ka municipalities. Mao nang natay district jails. And the next is the commitment order. So it is a written order of the court or any other agency authorized by law to issue entrusting an inmate to a jail for the purpose of safekeeping during the pendency of his or her case. So it is very important na the main purpose of commitment order is for safekeeping during the pendency of the case of the inmate. So kaning commitment order, it is one of the requirements na atong ihatag dito sa gator, atong ihatag sa BJMP once atong i-transfer ang isa ka inmate or isa ka detainee from our local police station to the prisons or the jails covered by the BJMP. So for example, ang isa ka tawo nadakpan siya, gidakop siya, gidaya siya sa PNP nga police station, and then upon recommendation of the court, i-transfer siya sa BJMP. So in transferring that person, kinahanglan nato ning commitment order kaaron dawaton siya didto. Kani nagpamatuod nga kani nga tawo is atong entrust into the BJMP for the purpose of safekeeping this person. So waya pa na siya nag-serve sa ijahang sentence, but he or she is just waiting for his or her case to be solved. So either ma-convict siya or makalaya siya. So that is commitment order. Then we have contraband. So this is any article, item, or thing prohibited by law and or forbidden by jail rules that would pose a security hazards or endanger the lives of inmates. Kung mayroon tag contraband, katuning mga gamit nga dili pwede, prohibited by the law and the rules of the jails. Conjugal visitation, so refers to the visit of the wife for a short period, usually an hour more or less, to her incarcerated husband, during which they are allowed privacy and are generally understood to have sexual contact. So kaning conjugal visitation, kung ang wife mo kadto sa jail and then they will be given isa ka oras sa isa ka room. So it is expected that they will have the sexual intercourse na. So that is what why it is called as conjugal visitation. And then we have detainee. So it is a person is accused before a court or competent authority and is temporarily confined in jail while undergoing or awaiting investigation, trial, or final judgment. So detainee ang atong itawag sa isa ka tawo nga napriso tungod kay in any causes, but waya pa siya nahimo nga convict. So this person is either waiting for the investigation, for the trial, or for the final judgment. So detainee pa lamang ang atong tawag ana nila. Ang district jail naman is a facility or a place of confinement for inmates coming from a city or clustered municipalities. So either gikan sila sa city or other municipalities who are awaiting or undergoing trial or serving a sentence of 1 day to 3 years. So it's either nagkuyat pa siya sa trial or undergoing pa ihang trial, or ang ijahang sentence na siya sentence for a period of 1 day to 3 years. Then we have drug dependence. So those are those inmates who have psychological craving for habituation to and abuse of or physiologic reliance on a chemical or drug substance. So drug dependent na ang tao kung dili na niya kaya bitaw nga mabuhi nga wayay drugs. So dependent as siya kaadyo adto mo function siya kada adlaw, it's because of the drugs and hindi na niya ma-stop. That is drug dependence. Drug users, so katong mga tao nga nagamit ng drugs. Escape prone inmates, persons or inmates who are likely to have the tendency to escape from the jail or facility. Gay, katuning mga is a male homosexual inmate who experiences romantic love or sexual attraction to a fellow male inmate. Then we have our high-risk inmates in the BJMP jails. So, considered sila nga highly dangerous or with a high probability of escaping or being rescued because of the gravity of the crimes they're accused of, or have the propensity for being troublemakers or initiators of jail riots and disturbance, and who require a high degree of control and supervision. So, particularly, sila tong mga charged with heinous crimes, grabe kalala nga mga crimes, murder, terrorism, kidnap for ransom, violation of RA number 9165, the imposable penalty for which is from life imprisonment to death. So, either life imprisonment or death ang ilahang sentensya. These also include those who have a record of escaping from jails. So, kung gikan na sila ni-escape from jails, recidivist, habitual delinquents, and those with severe personality or emotional disorders that make them dangerous for their fellow inmates or other jail personnel. Next is the high-profile inmates in BJMP jails. Kato ni silang not necessarily kuno nga gi-charge sila with heinous crimes, but prominent figures sila. Kung may prominent figures, ilado sila karadyaw in the society or the public figures whose cases have drawn public interest. So, for example, kanang mga artista or mga politicians, their high profile is because ilado man sila, not because of the crime that they committed only, but also because of their main profile. Then we have our infirmed inmates. Kung may infirmed inmates, kato ni silang physically or mentally weak for a prolonged period of time, specifically caused by age or illness. So, either na sila sakit or they are like that is because of old age. Tungkol grabe na nila ka tiguyang. Inmate is the generic term used to refer to a detainee or prisoner. So, generic term na nato, ginatawag natin silang inmates. Inmates with disability, kato na ang mga impairment, physical, cognitive, mental, sensory, emotional, developmental, or some combination of these. Inmates with other nationalities, katuning mga foreign nationals. Instrument of restraint, kung may tag-restraint gani, this is a device, contrivance, tool, or instrument used. Kung may tag-restraint, we hold them back, keep in, check or control the inmate. So, for example, ang isa ka handcuff. So, di ba nag-restrain na sa isa ka inmate. Kanang mga PC, those are types of restraining materials. Then, jail is a place of confinement for city and municipal detainees or prisoners, any fugitive from justice or person detained awaiting or undergoing investigation or trial and or pending transfer to the national penitentiary, and or violent, mentally or ill person who endangers himself or herself or the safety of others, duly certified as such by the proper medical or health officer pending transfer to a medical institution. So, kung may tag jail, of course, it is just under the BJMP. Kay kanay sila nag-hold to confine those prisoners or detainees from city and municipality in the district. Sila po tong mga fugitive from justice, nagatago, wanted persons, dira nila ibutang sa jail, persons detained awaiting, naghulat pa or nag-undergo pa sa ilang investigation or trial, na di kaya pending pa ang ilang transfer to the National Penitentiary or the Bucor. Sila po itong muhold sa mga tao who are violent, mentally ill person na nag-endanger sa ilang kaugalingon or the safety of others. So, ang matudra na is katong mga medical or health officers of the BJMP. Then we have our jail aid. So it is an inmate who requires less supervision. So inmate ra ni siya who requires a less supervision than other inmates. Although he or she may be assigned special tasks, he or she has no special privileges and is not allowed to work alone nor exercise any authority over other inmates. So, kanang atong mga inmates nga makasaligan inside the jail tungod kay very kuan sila, very active, mga buutan sila, masaligan it comes to special tasks. And then we have the jail incident. So, any untoward or uncommon actions, events, or conditions such as jailbreak, riot, noise barrage, stabbing, or assault upon personnel that occurs in jail and perpetrated by any person which may or may not have followed or depended upon another action of grave or serious consequences such as escape, injury, death, fire, flood, earthquake, or other calamity which affects the jail. So, jail incident kung naitawo, be it the inmates or the personnel nga nagakos ng ingani nga mga disturbances inside the jail. So, anything that is called as jail incident. Jailbreak is the escape from jail by more than 2 inmates. So, kung ang more than 2 inmates ni-escape sila gikan sa jail, that is jailbreak, especially when they use force, threat, violence, or deceit, or by breaching security barriers such as by scaling or perimeter fence, by tunneling and or other similar means, or by burning or destructing of the facility or a portion of the facility which or without the aid of jail officer or any other person. So, and any means nga nagamit sila aning force, threat, violence, or deceit, or pag-breach ng security para lamang makaikyas, that is jailbreak. Jail escape is an act of leaving. So, act of leaving na siya, different from jailbreak, because jailbreak is the manner. Jail escape is the act from jail of an inmate through unofficial and legal ways or without any legal order from the authorities. So, kung unofficial or illegal ilang pamaagi para hawa iskapo sila sa jail, then that is jail escape. Jail warden, so person charged with the overall operation and administrative control of the jail. Illegal contraband naman are those that are unlawful in themselves and not because of some extraneous circumstances. So, dangerous drugs, weapons, potential weapons, and explosives. So, illegal contraband siya kung that by itself is very dangerous. And also, if kana nga butang is prohibited bisan pa outside the prison or the jail, that is illegal contraband. Lesbian, female homosexual inmate, mentally ill, katuning mga nagsuffer from mental illness and afflicted with or exhibiting irrational mental soundness. The date is a Metimus order. So, it is a warrant issued by a court bearing its seal and the signature of the judge, directing the jail or the prison authorities to receive inmates for the service of sentence. So, ganina, we discussed the commitment order nga. Katong commitment order is a document needed for the transfer of inmate para for the purpose of safekeeping. Kanina may Metimus order, kinhanglan ni nato once i-transfer nato ang isa ka inmate into the Bucor or the prisons for the purpose of serving their sentence. So, kung ready na mag-serve kay naanay sentence ang isa ka inmate and then i-transfer na nato siya sa Bucor, then we will need a Metimus order along with other documents. So, ang purpose ng Metimus order, of course, is for the service of sentence. Ang purpose ng commitment order is for the purpose, the safekeeping of the inmate. Nasabdan ka to. Municipal jail is a facility or a place of confinement for those who are sentenced with a penalty of for a term of not exceeding 6 months imprisonment. So, kung 1 day to 6 months ang sentence ng atong inmate, pwede siya dito sa municipal jail. Nuisance contraband, so are those that may not be classified as illegal under the Philippine laws but are forbidden by jail rules. So, kung kana nga butang is bawal na inside the jail, although it is not bawal outside in the Philippine laws, that is called as nuisance contraband. Lahi ang illegal contraband and then lahi sad ang nuisance contraband. So, for example na lamang aning mga cellphone, mga personal belongings of the inmates. Offender, so refers to a person is accused of violating or transgressing laws and ordinances passed by competent authorities in the Philippines. And then penology, pregnant inmates, katuning mga buntis nga mga inmates. Prisoner is an inmate who is convicted by final judgment. Prisoner ang tawag sa imo if you are convicted by final judgment. Provincial jail naman is a place of confinement for inmates who are sentenced with imprisonment from 6 months and 1 day to 3-year imprisonment. So, kung 6 months and 1 day to 3-year imprisonment ang sentence ng isa ka prisoner, then he will be sent to the provincial jail. Reformation means amending or improving by changing inmates' behavior or removing his or her faults or abuse and removing or correcting an abuse, wrong or error. So reformation, kung gusto natong transform ang isa ka tawo, that is by changing the inmates behavior. So gina-remove nato ang bad behaviors of that person and gi-develop nato siya into reliable ones and good ones. So in that we reform the offender. Then regional director ang tawag sa katong head ng atong BJMP, regional office of the BJMP. Rehabilitation, safekeeping refers to the temporary custody of a person for his or her own protection from the community he or she comes from and for the community he or she comes from. So ang temporary custody kuno ng isa ka tawo, ng isa ka inmate para protection ng iyang kaugalingon or the community is what we call as safekeeping. In order to safekeep a person, we will need a commitment order along with other documents so that ma-safekeep ang isa ka tawo. Senior citizen inmates, katuning mga old age bracket na nga mga inmates. Sex offenders, of course, kung kani nga mga crimes ang ilang gipang himo, then they will be called as sex offenders. Sexual deviates. Inmates have a type of mental disorder characterized by preference for or obsession with unusual sexual practices. So, kung na unusual sexual practices ang isa ka inmate and then nakulong siya tungod ana nga reason, then they will be called as sexual deviates. I think na sa inyong human behavior. Suicidal inmates naman, katuning mga tao nga gusto na magpakamatay, so dapat i-separate sila and they will need a constant supervision. Transgender, transfer. So, ang transfer is the delivery, notwithstanding his or her or their appeal of an inmate or inmates sentenced to more than 3-year imprisonment from any BJMP man jail to any of the Bureau of Corrections, prisons, or penal farm, or the delivery of an inmate from BJMP man jail to another jail facility. So, ang transfer, of course, mora na ang pag-deliver nato sa isa ka inmate, either sa isa ka jail or other jails, or kung adto na siya nato ihatod sa Bureau of Correction. So we are done with the Rule 1 or the general provision. So let's move on to commitment and classification of prisoners and detainees. So a person can be committed to jail only upon the issuance of an appropriate order by a competent court or authority so mandated under the Philippine laws. So this rule enumerates courts and authorities and classifies inmates according to the conditions of their commitment. So, makomit na nato or maadto na nato ang isa ka inmate sa isa ka jail kung naay appropriate order gikan sa isa ka korte or isa ka authority under the Philippine law. So, kung gimando na sa balaod, then dira rata magkaroon ng custodial function to a person who is under the jail or the prison. So, let's move on to commitment. So, kung may commitment, it means entrusting for the confinement of an inmate to a jail by a competent court or authority for the purpose of safekeeping during the pendency of his or her case. So, ang commitment banggod, it means atong gihatag ang ato ang pagsalig ang authority to the agency, to the bureau, to the department nga mao'y maghawid to have the custodial function when it comes to the inmate. So, kani nga inmate is there for the safekeeping or tungod kay naghuyat pa sila sa status sa ilahang case. So, that is commitment. Courts and other entities authorized to commit a person to the jail. So, kanira sila nga mga agencies ang pwede mag-send ng person into jail. So we have the Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, Sandigan Bayan, Regional Trial Court, Metropolitan or Municipal Trial Court, Municipal Circuit Trial Court, Congress of the Philippines, and other administrative bodies or persons authorized by law to arrest and commit a person to the jail. So, kanang mga other agencies nga who are not included in these bracket, dili na sila pwede mag-hold ng isa ka tawo for the purpose of safekeeping ita lamang. So, sila ra ang atong gina-authorize in committing these person to jail. Then we have classification. So this refers to assigning or to grouping of inmates according to their respective penalty, gender, age, nationality, health, criminal records, and etc. So, kung magbase ta diri sa ato ang manual, of course, gina-classify na nato, gina-separate na nato sila according to their penalty. So, kung grave offense ang imuhang nahimo, grave felony imuhang nahimo, maong naka sa prisuhan, then your facility will be separated from those who committed the offense or light offenses. Of course, i-separate na to ang atong mga bakla, ang atong mga tomboy, LGBTQIA+ members from the other inmates. It's because we want them to not experience discrimination inside the jail. Age po nila para matutukan nato pagtarong ang mga tiguya. And then, katong mga bata pa or mga CICL, bawal to nato sila itibo sa mga dagko na. Nationality, kung foreigner ang isa ka tawo, to avoid more conflict by other laws, international laws, then we will separate them. Health, kung kaning nga inmate, kailangan nato sila ng special supervision because of their health. Kailangan po natin silang i-separate. And then, mostly, their criminal record. So, that is classification. Gina-assign na nato sila into grouping. Categories of inmates. So, the two general categories of inmates are prisoner and detainee. Kung mayon tag-prisoner, katunay silang mga convicted na by final judgment. Kung detainee pa ang person, undergoing investigation or trial procedure or awaiting procedure for final judgment. So, mana ang kalahian ng prisoner and the detainee. So, classification of prisoners. So, natay upat ka main classification of prisoners. Natay insular prisoner. Kung may tag-insular prisoner, kato ni silang sentence to a prison term of 3 years and 1 day. Timan nato 3 years and 1 day to reclusion perpetua or life imprisonment. So, kung kaning nga tawo is ang iyang sentence is reclusion perpetua na into or life imprisonment na, then adto na sila sa insular prisoners. Kung may tag insular prisoners, we call that also as national prisoners. So, under na sila sa Bureau of Corrections. Then we have the provincial prisoner. So, one who is sentenced to a prison term of 6 months and 1 day to 3 years. So, provincial prisoner ang atong tawag anak kung ang tawo is sentenced to 6 months and 1 day to 3 years. 6 months and 1 day to 3 years. City prisoner naman if ang iyang sentence is 1 day to 3 years. And municipal prisoners if ang iyang sentence is 1 day to 6 months. 1 day to 6 months. So, those are our classification of prisoners. Then we have our classification of detainees. So, the 3 classes of detainees and are those undergoing investigation. Naguyat pa sila sa ilang investigation kung unsa na status sa ilang kaso. Awaiting pa sila, naguyat pa sila, or undergoing pa ang ilang trial. Dili pa sila makonvict tungod kay waya pa na human ang trial, and then awaiting for final judgment. So, kung human na ilang trial, naguyat pa sila sa final judgment ng judge, they will be classified as detainees. So, kung detainees ra gani ka, dito ra ka sa BJMP. If you are already a prisoner, you could be in the BJMP, but you can also be in the Bureau of Corrections. Then we have our inmate security classification. Human na ta sa high profile inmate, human na sa high risk inmate. diri na ta sa high value target or the HVT. So a target, either a resource or a person who may either be an enemy combatant, high-ranking official, or a civilian in danger of capture or death, typically in possession of critical intelligence data or authority marked as an objective for a mission, and which a commander requires for the successful completion of the same. So high value target ang isa ka tawo kung naas day ginahawiran nga information that is very important, very classified gajud nga in holding that, in possessing that information, na as jay possibility nga patjun siya or i-kidnap siya ng mga sindikato. So high value target siya, kinahanglan niya ng special protection order. Security threat group, sila tong mga formal or informal ongoing inmates or group, gang, organization or association consisting of 3 or more members falling into one of the following basic categories. So it's either mga gang sila, kung unsa sila nga mga groups nga very harmful to the society, they will be classified as security threat group. Subversive group naman are the group of persons that adopts or advocates subversive principles or policies tending to overthrow or undermine an established government. So kadto bitong mga NPA, subversive group to sila, na ana sila yung mga principles or different from that of a normal person. Terrorist group naman, if they have committed rebellion or insurrection, kudita, murder, kidnapping, and or serious illegal detention, and such of these crimes, for example, mga crimes against national security, so they will be called as terrorist group, as long as na sila other group who is tending to overthrow the government. Violent extremist group or violent extremist offenders, a person whose political or religious ideologies are considered far outside the mainstream attitudes of the society, or who violates common moral standards and who has adopted an increasingly extreme ideals and aspirations, resorting to the employment of violence in the furtherance of his or her beliefs. So for example, katong mga cult groups nato in the Philippines, katong gikan nat sa San Juan bitaw, katong kinsa to siya, katong gikan sa San Juan, katong gikan sa Socorro, they could be violent extremist offenders. Si Kibuloy could be a violent extremist offender. So as long as they are they will tend to do violent behaviors because of their ideologies, they will be called as VEO. Medium risk inmates, those who represent a moderate risk to the public and staff. These inmates still require greater security, control, and supervision, as they might escape from and might commit violence inside the jail. Medium risk inmates. Then we have the minimum risk inmates. Katong mga inmates have lesser tendencies to commit offenses and generally pose the least risk to public safety. Mostly kato kuning mga first time offenders. So, mao na niyang requirements nato for commitment. So, once i-transfer nato ang isa ka tawo, isa ka inmate from jail to jail, or the police station to the jails covered by the BJMP, mao ni ato kinahanglan. Katong commitment order nga gikan sa judge, medical certificate niya nga dapat recent pa, dapat within 24 hours na gikuha. Complaint or information. So complaint katong ija nga reklamo laban sa ija nga naay probable cause nagapamatuod nga possible nga naay crime nga iyahang gihimo. And then police booking sheet and the certificate of detention from the PNP and or the NBI. So we are done with the rule 2. Let's move on to the reception and releasing procedures, classification board, disciplinary board, and punishable acts of inmates. So one of the guiding principles of the United Nations Standard Minimum Rules for the treatment of prisoners states that imprisonment and other measures which result in cutting off an offender from the outside world are inflictive by the very fact of taking from a person the right of self-determination by depriving him or her of his or her liberty. Therefore, the prison system shall not except as incidental to justifiable segregation of the maintenance of discipline, aggravate the suffering inherent in such a situation. So, dili pwede nga kani nga mga inmates ato na gani silang gikuhaan og liberty nila ato pagad yung himuon nga mas grabe or lala ang ilahang situation dito inside the jail. Hence, a well-planned and organized reception of detainees is critical to achieving this. So the inmate's first impression of correctional process greatly influences his or her attitude and behavior towards the custodial and rehabilitative regimens he or she must undergo during confinement, and perhaps to some extent affect his or her outlook and adjustment after his or her release. So this rule provides guidance on the reception and disciplinary aspects of the jail management. So let's move on to the reception procedures. Kung yung tag-reception man yung step by step na itong agihon, in order for the inmate to be received in a BJMP facility. So, mo yung mga procedures ang kinahanglan nato na i-observed. We have number 1, the gaiter. So, kaning gaiter, he or she checks the credentials of all the person bringing the inmate or the committing officer to determine his or her identity and authority. So, kinahanglan, i-check na to ang credential kung tama ba, sakto ba nga this person is the committing officer nga may magdaya sa inmate or may nagdaya or authorized na magdaya sa inmate diri sa jail or facility. We will identify the identity, the authority of the committing officer. So, also, he or she receives the completeness of the following documents before the person bringing an inmate or the committing officer is allowed to enter the facility. So, mga mga documents nga kinahanglan nga i-check ng gaiter. So, kaning gaiter, mga ni si Jang officer nga naa sa gate of the BJMP facility. So, i-check ani ni ang tao nga nagdaya sa of course, nagdaya sa inmate para lantaw ni Jang, authority ni Jang this person is authorized from the court. So, in the gate, kailangan nato ni nga mga documents for the inmates and the officer to be allowed inside the jail. So, number 1, danawon nato if naaba si Jay commitment order. So, we have discussed what is commitment order. Next is medical certificate, complaint or information, the police booking sheet, and the certificate of detention from the PNP and or the NBI. So, kung asa si Jagikan, gikulong, kung gikan bisa sa PNP or sa NBI, kinahanglan nato ang ilang certificate of detention. So, kani nga mga butang, mauni ang ato ang timalanan nga importante once ato nang pa-receive ang isa ka officer, ang isa ka offender or isa ka detainee inside the jail under the BJMP. So, manang i-check ni gaiter. Additionally, the gaiter shall subject the person to be committed and his or her escorts for search and inspection as prescribed. So, dito sa PowerPoint nato atong pre-final na dito yung mga types of inspection or search. So, tanawa na lang to ninyo dito. Next, after mahumanta diri sa gaiter, kung nakasuyod na sila, then they will proceed to the records unit. Ang kaning records unit examines the completeness and authenticity of the requirements, kung kompleto ba ni nga mga requirements sa taas, and then kung authentic ba or genuine ba ang ilahang mga copy. Pagod ka na ron. Adyo pag bana-bana ba? Visit, magajog ka. So sa records unit, they will examine kung kompleto ba and authentic ba ang requirements nga gidayan ni committing officer and the inmate before it refers the inmate to the physical examination by the health unit. So kung kompleto, authentic ang mga records nga gidala nila, then ang records unit is i-refer sila dito sa health unit. So diri sa health unit, of course gina-check gihapon ang authenticity ng medical certificate of the inmate. Tanaw ni siya kung kompleto ba or tinuod ba ang gipamutang diri nga naa sa sakit, tinuod ba nga kanaang wala sa mga pasa. They will conduct a thorough physical examination of the inmate para ma-determine ang iyahang tinuod nga physical condition. Kay base it's very obvious na nasa jay bruises, and then pagtanaw sa medical certificate is absence ang bruises dito. So dili na pwede. And asks searching questions to determine injury or injuries found to have been sustained by the inmate after the conduct of medical examination, or those injuries not diagnosed prior to commitment in jail. So pangutan-on sad ang inmate ni medical officer nga base na sa mga injuries nga na-commit after the medical examination. Kaya aron maotro na sad siya pag examine. So, ang inmate is required to undress while undergoing medical examination. Female inmate shall be examined by female health professional, and of course, kung layaki ka na inmate, layaki sad ang health personnel. In case of any discrepancy found during physical examination, but same discrepancy is not indicated in the medical certificate, the committing officer shall be required to secure another medical certificate of the inmate. So, kung naay discrepancy sa medical certificate ni inmate, kinahanglan o truhon ang medical certificate ni inmate. So, it's either ang mag-examine sa ija is medical officer or personnel inside the jail, or a private officer, as long as within 24 hours mahibalik na siya dito sa jail. So kung may discrepancy na makita dito ni medical officer, the inmate shall be referred back to the records unit. So ibalik siya sa records unit. Sa records unit, of course, sa receiving officer will conduct these following procedures. So, he or she will start the booking procedure. So, i-accomplish na ang jail booking sheet, strip search the inmate to check for any birthmark, tattoos, and etc. Encode the inmate's information to the NIMS, fingerprint and photograph the inmate with a mugshot background, and list the names of the visitors authorized by the inmate. I-apprise sad the inmate in a dialect that he or she understands of the provisions of Article 29 of the RPC, which was further amended by RA 10592. So, katong ato ang preventive imprisonment nga law. So, pangutan-on si Jay, if musugot ba ka nga ang pagtrato namo diri sa imo inside the jail is like convicted person. So, kung musugot ang inmate, it means nga the period nga iyahang gigugol or the years, months nga iyahang gispent dito sa BJMP facility will be fully credited once na siya final verdict or na siya final sentence. Kung dili siya mosugot nga tratuhon siya as a convicted person inside the jail, then therefore forfeit ra sa iyahang period or time nga ginaspend sa BJMP o jail ang makredit once na siya sentence from the judge. Facilitate the signing of the detainee's manifestation if he or she agrees to abide by the same disciplinary rules imposed upon convicted inmates. So, kung masugot si detainee, na siya pirmahan nga detainee's manifestation. So, nag-ingon nga si detainee, nisugot siya nga ang trato sa ija is like a convicted inmate. Otherwise, the warden issues a certification under oath manifesting that the inmate was apprised of the provisions of Article 29 of the RPC as amended and refused to abide by the same. So, kung dili sila masugot, mag-issue lang sila ng certificate na si inmate is gipahibay nila ani nga balaod pero waya ni sugot si inmate. And store all documents in the inmate's carpeta. So, tanan dito nga mga certificate, tanan nga mga document nga makuha nila dito sa receiving unit, ila tong ibutang sa inmate's carpeta. So, dito sa record ni inmate. Then, we have the property custodian. So, si property custodian will check the inmate's belongings for presence of contraband discovered of any contraband shall be treated in accordance with the existing policies. So, tan-aon kung naabay mga gamit nga dili pwede inside the jail nga gidaya ni inmate kaya aron i-confiscate to ni property custodian. And then takes all cash and other personal properties from the inmate, lists them down on a receipt form with duplicate. So, na ay himuon nga resibo dito ni property custodian. Nakabutang dito ang mga gamit nga iyahang gi-confiscate from the inmate. And then, the original will be taken by the inmate and then ang duplicate is ihatag kang property custodian. Keeps all cash and other valuables of the inmate in a safety vault. Said cash and valuables may be turned over to any person authorized by the inmate. So, ang tanan cash ni inmate ba dyan, mga gamit ni dyan very important to him or her nga na-value is either i-keep ng property custodian or kwaon sa tawo nga gi-authorize ni inmate. Then refers the inmate to the desk officer. So after sa property custodian, i-add to siya sa desk officer. So si desk officer books the newly committed inmate in the jail blotter, assigns the inmate to a reception area, if any, where he or she shall be scheduled for orientation on jail rules and regulations and shall undergo risk assessment and classification, evaluation, and conduct of further medical evaluation or screening by the medical officers. Kung humana siya sa property custodian, i-add to siya kang desk officer. Si desk officer, i-just siyang i-refer first ibutang ani niya ang mga documents ni inmate into the jail blotter. And then i-assign na siya sa isa ka reception area kung naa manggaling reception area dito. So, hatagan na siya ng schedule for orientation sa mga balaod inside the jail. And then, i-undergo siya ng risk assessment kung unsa man siya ka risky, if high ka na nga atong ginatawag nga katong classification of inmates, kung super maximum, medium or minimum ba siya. I-classify na siya, i-evaluate and conduct of any medical evaluation. So, for example, mga psychological tests or psychological or psychiatric tests or screening, kinahanglan ang mag-perform is the medical officer. So, man ang trabaho ni desk officer. And then, we have the assistant warden or officer of the day. So, si assistant warden or the officer of the day, man ay mag-orient sa katong bag-o nga gicommit nga mga inmates in the jail. With the jail rules and regulation using the inmates orientation sheet. So, siya ang mag-orient sa mga newly committed inmates. Then, we have the jail warden. So, si jail warden coordinates with concerned agencies regarding the case of inmate for speedy disposition and to furnish them with the copies of the available needed documents. So, kung kinsa man ganito nga mga tao nga na ay connection with the case of the inmate, for example, kaning sila presiding judge, executive judge, and the like, hatagan ni sila og mga copies or inform ni sila nga this inmate is in the hands of this BJMP facility. So, for example, ang PNP, NBI, and the family are mandatory nga hatagan gid sila ng information or documents. And then we have the classification board. And then we have the classification board. So each jail shall maintain a classification board if facilities and personnel are available to be composed of the following. So ang atong chairperson, again, di nato kalimtan kaysa quiz, mapa-quiz ba na or oral recitation ba na, waya mo kabayo kung kinsay chairperson. Last time katong nagklase ta, ingon ko nga permitimanan kung kinsay chairperson ng classification board, waya gadyo nagtimaan. Gamay rin naka-answer. So mao ni ang mga members ng classification board. We have the chief, medical, jail, chaplain, inmates. So kana sila upat, lima, mao na sila ang classification board na ginatawag. So sila ang responsible for the classification process of the inmates once they are received in the BJMP facility. Next is the duties and functions of the classification board. So the classification board is tasked to conduct background investigation of the inmates to determine the cell assignment, the appropriate rehabilitative program, the type of supervision and degree of custody and restrictions applicable to the inmates. So sila di ay ang ginatask to conduct katong background information about ani nga inmate. Kung unsa man ni siyang inmate, unsa man ni siyang pagkatawo, unsa may iyahang risk factors kay aron sa cell assignment niya or sa iyahang area kung asa siya magstay inside the jail is ma-prepare nato kung unsa man gani ang kailangan nga security needed for this inmate. So mao ni ang ato ang pang himuon. So mao ni ang trabaho sa classification board. So the investigation shall focus on the following. So kani nga mga data mao tanan niyang himuon sa classification board. So facts and data of the present case. So of course kinahanglan nila ang katong karpeta or the inmate's jacket to see and to check if unsa man ni about nga tawo, unsa may makalaki ani nga tawo, kung naa ba ni siya sakit, if pilay ija edad. So tanan na nga mga information is tan-aw ng classification board. Next is the inmate's recent criminal history and the facts about the inmate's attitudes and behavior while confined in other institutions if the inmate is a recidivist or a habitual delinquent. So tan-aw sad nila ang criminal history ani nga tawo kung unsa na may ija na commit or dis aman si gikan before si gi-admit diri sa BJMP. Kung kani ba nga tawo is gikan na nini escape na ba ni si history of escaping facility, o di kaya if this person is already or had been sent to jail before. So tan-aw na nila kay aron ma-classify po nila kung unsa may type of degree of security ang ilang ihatag ani nga inmate. And then we have biography or life history. So including na dira ang family background, iyahang background sa iyang education, sa iyahang profession, vocation ani nga tawo, kung tambay ba ni o unsa ba. Medical history kung sa iyahang mga sakit physically, emotionally, mentally. Vocational, recreational, educational, and religious background or interest, and psychological characteristics as evaluated by the psychiatrist and psychologists. So mao ni nga mga information ang kinahanglan hibaw-on ng classification board for the purpose of classification. So the inmate is required to appear before the classification board. Kinahanglan in receiving the inmate, kinahanglan moadto na sila sa classification board. Makita na sila sa classification board for validation of his or her profile. Upon completion of the classification assessment, the inmate is then apprised of his or her cell assignment and welfare programs appropriate for him or her. So after investigation, upon the classification assessment, i-assign na siya sa iyahang cell, kung asa siya dapit nga selda, asa siya nga area. And then ang iyahang mga programs nga kinahanglan ni diyang i-undergo while he is serving his or her sentence. Then he or she is asked if he or she is willing to undergo this program for his or her own good. Pangutanon na siya kung willing ba ka nga mag-undergo ka ani nga mga process or programs for your betterment while naa ka diri sa ilayom. If he or she is willing, the board will see to it that the program planned for the inmate is followed. Then the inmate is assigned to his or her cell according to the approved classification. So, mao na ang himuon ni board of classification. Then, let's go to the classification process. So, in classification process, of course, di na sila pwede magpataka kaya na sila procedures. So, we have the admission of inmate. So, in admission of inmate, once the inmate has undergone the registration process, katong ganina, he or she will be temporarily housed. Temporary anay siya nga ibutang sa inmate classification and counseling unit. Now, you need to understand na ang ilahang reception here in the classification area is different from the Bureau of Corrections. Kaya ang diri sa sa BJMP ginatawag na nato nga inmate classification and counseling unit. I-house ni sila diri temporarily in jails where it is available. Kung available sad ang ICCU. So the inmate shall stay at the ICCU for a minimum period of 30 days. Minimum period of 30 days, but not exceeding 60 days. So 30 to 60 days ibutang siya sa ICCU or until the completion of the classification process or bisan pag above na ana until makomplete ra gud kuno ang classification process. At the ICCU, the newly committed inmate will undergo assessment by the different health professionals. So, under the ICCU, mag-undergo dito ang inmate nato ng klase-klase nga health examination by the health professionals. Then we have the medical examination. So, the jail medical officer of the jail officer designated nurse or the jail officer designated nurse of the health unit will conduct a thorough physical examination on the newly committed inmate and will note down significant bodily marks, scars, tattoos, and lesions based on the medical certificate presented by the committing officer. So, tan-awon dito ni medical or health ni medical officer kung unsa may iyang mga tattoo na ba siya mga tattoo na ba siya mga scars, mga ila or mga lesions baka ha based sa iyang certificate kung tinuod ba gadget ang gibutang dito. He or she must ensure that his or her findings are congruent kinahanglan kinahanglan sakto haom dito sa medical certificate nga gi-present ganina. And then any discrepancy shall warrant further investigation by and reporting of the same to the CHR. So kung naman gani dito dili amo ilan nang verify and then they will investigate as to sa mga jud kamatauran ini kung sa mga jud sa medical health of the person. Results of the medical examination shall be recorded and shall bear the signature of the physician or nurse who conducted the examination. Medical issues will be attended by accordingly. And then we have the dental examination. So, ang jail dentist shall perform a thorough dental examination and recording of his or her findings. The record shall bear the signature of the dentist who conducted the examination. So, ang dental issues that need immediate attention shall be attended to accordingly. And we have the psychological examination. So, ang psychologist in charge, mani mag-conduct sa ilahang psychological examination inside the ICCU para ma-determine ang psychological state ng atong inmate, basig na ni siya trauma, basig na ni siya phobias, or unsa may iyahang mental illnesses or disabilities, basig na ni depression or suicidal ba ni nga tabo, or in the health assessment or card or HAS and has bear the signature of the psychologist who conducted the examination. So under the ICCU dira na makita kung unsa may psychological state ani nga tawo ngano nakakommit ka ni siya of crime, and then unsa may kinahanglan nila to psychologically treat this person, psychiatrically treat this person. And then we have the social case study. So the social worker at the ICCU shall conduct in-depth interview with the newly admitted inmate. Ang inmate, the interview that considers who the inmate is. So kaning sa social case study, ang si social worker iyahang i-interview ang ang inmate with the who the inmate is questions. So pangutan-on kung kinsa man ka, unsa may imuhang mga likes, unsa may imuhang mga hobbies, just personal questions para sa isa ka inmate. From birth up to the present, including his or her familial educational, social, vocational, and other issues that has an impact on his or her personality. Para ma-understand nila ang status ng isa ka inmate nga nganong nag-commit na siya ng crime. And then, para na reasons to believe nga this person is still treatable. The findings will be recorded and shall bear the signature of the social worker who conducted the assessment in jails without ICCU. The interview will be done by the social worker in charge upon the order of the court or as requested by the medical officer, the psychiatrist, or the duly designated jail warden or for specific purposes. Then we have risk assessment. So the risk assessment tool shall be utilized to determine the level of violence or risk the inmate possess, either external or internal. So tan-aw na nila kung unsa man ni siya ka risky nga pagkatawo, ka-hazardous nga pagkatawo sa iyang kaugalingon, and also to the inmates that will he or she be surrounded with. So tan-aw na nila kaya ma-determine na nila kung unsa man ni siya ka-abusive, unsa man siya ka-violent, kung na ba ni siya reason to cause riot inside the jail, or unsa ra kan nga jail incidents ijahang mahihimo dito inside the jail. If needed bas niya ng deep security, constant, so dira sa risk assessment nila mahibayaan. Next is the psychiatric evaluation. So using the results of the psychological examination, social case study, and risk assessment, the psychiatrist conducts a psychiatric evaluation para ma-determine ang present mental state of the inmate and to diagnose any existing psychiatric illness for further treatment. So the result will be recorded and shall bear the signature of the psychiatrist who conducted the examination. So ang inmate mag-undergo siya ani nga mga psychiatric evaluation. So the jail psychologist refers the inmate to for further evaluation. Inyo ra ka nang basa ako na sa inyong libro. The working diagnosis will be recorded at the inmate's health assessment card, and the details of the examination will be written in the psychiatrist's logbook provided by the jail health unit. Every examination result shall bear the signature of the examining psychiatrist. So tanan examination kinahanglan it is with a bearing, so therefore it should have signature sa kung kinsa man ang nag-conduct ana nga examination. Next is case management. Inmate will be assigned to a specific case manager who may either be a psychologist, social worker, or a nurse. So the case manager shall be responsible for the consolidation of all the results and shall make the proper decision as to the classification of the inmates and the identification development programs for each inmate. Inmate orientation and counseling. So while undergoing assessment, ang inmate ko shall be oriented on the basic jail rules and regulations. So, i-introduce siya into different developmental programs para sa iyang own growth. Inmate evaluation and classification. So, using the different tools of assessment, the newly committed inmate will now be classified based on the level of risk and present physical, mental, and emotional state. So, diri na sa evaluation, inmate evaluation and classification na siya mahibayan sa iyahang status holistically. Proper cell assignment and development plans. So, after ito nga mga assessment, ang case manager, i-consolidate na niya ang tanang resulta, and based sa resulta ng final evaluation nila, tagaan na si inmate ng iyahang assigned cell. The newly committed inmate is encouraged to participate in recommended developmental programs. Next is monitoring. So after the inmate has been transferred to his or her assigned cell and has been attending the prescribed developmental programs, the case manager shall periodically monitor and change the enhanced inmate development programs depending on his or her behavioral progress. So of course, in monitoring the inmate, kinahanglan periodically he or she will be attended. Next is the disciplinary board. So a disciplinary board shall be organized and maintained for the purpose of hearing disciplinary cases. Kaning disciplinary board ning giapil adun sa inyohang istadihan kay aron sa oral. However, waya mo kabayo kung kinsa man ang atong composition of the disciplinary board. So timan-an ninyong disciplinary board. So naatay ang chairperson nato again is still the assistant warden. Ang member nato is kani silang 5. Chief Custodial Security Office, Medical Officer, Public Health Officer, Jail Chaplain, Inmates Welfare and Development Officer, and we also have an inmates representative. So mao ni ang ato ang Board of Disciplinary of the BJMP. If the above composition is not feasible, if wala magani ni sila or any of them is waya because of personnel limitation, tawad kay gamay ra ang personnel, the warden shall perform the board's functions and he shall act as the summary disciplinary officer. So for example, waya si jail chaplain, so pwede ra naa si jail warden. So si jail warden anay ang mag-perform anang ang mga tasks nga kinahanglan himuon ni jail chaplain. Next are the duties and functions of the disciplinary board. So si board is tasked to investigate the facts of an alleged misconduct referred to it. So since ang board of since ang disciplinary board is sila man ang mag-try sa tanan disciplinary cases inside the jail, their task of course to investigate kung unsa man gadyo nahitabo inside the jail. Nganong nganong gireklamo maning isa ka inmate dire. It shall hold sessions as often as necessary in a room which may be provided for the purpose. All cases referred to it shall be heard and decided within 48 hours. Kinahanglan within 48 hours ra nasulbad na tong kaso nga gihatag dito sa ilang anong kaninga tawo was accused of something or unsarakan nga transgression ang gihimo ani nga tawo inside the jail. So ang board, ang disciplinary board, ilahang task is para ma-solve na ni siya nga case or matry na within 48 hours from the date of receipt of the case. Then we have the authorized disciplinary actions / measures for inmates. So the board is authorized to impose any of the following disciplinary actions or measures. So pwede ni impose nga disciplinary measures given from disciplinary board. So for detainees, admonition or verbal reprimand. So once first time offender pa lang ka sa detainee, pwede ka nga kasabaan raanay for verbal reprimand to say nga dili na ninimo himuon or kasabaan ka because of why did you do this or that, why did you transgress the rules and regulations inside the jail. Next is restitution or reparation. So for restitution or reparation, pwede ra nga kani nga inmate dili anay siya hatagan ani nga privileges, i-restrict ani ni nato nga visiting sana privilege ng isa ka inmate or any other privileges or dagdagan makahaang work of this detainee inside the jail for restitution or reparation. Next is temporary or permanent cancellation of all or some recreational privileges. So pwede nga dili anay siya makaduwa ng sports inside the jail or any hobbies of this inmate is given a restriction inside the jail permanently or temporarily. So pwede na. Next is reduction of visiting time. Pwede nga although makavisit pa ang people authorized by the inmates sa ija, pero pwede nga gamyan na nila ang oras nga pwede siya bisitahon. So for example, pwede ang 3 hours. So tungod kay nakasaya man siya, kuan ra kan 1 hour ra kan ang visiting time niya. Then close confinement in a cell for a period not exceeding 7 days in any calendar month, provided that this disciplinary action shall be imposed only in the case of an incorrigible inmate and when other disciplinary measures had been proven ineffective. So kung gihimo na ni tanan nga mga disciplinary measures for the inmate and then dili gihapon siya very effective for the inmate, kay grabe ka gahi ang uyo sa inmate, grabe ka incorrigible, then pwede siya i-separate ng cell for a period of 7 days, not exceeding 7 days. So dili mo lagpas ng 7 days. Then transfer to another BJMP jail in the area in coordination with the court. So kung dili gadyon siya mahimo ug ana ra nga mga disciplinary measures, then ibalik siya ng facility basta under the BJMP lang. For prisoners naman, admonition or verbal reprimand. So, parehas detainee, pwede ra sa sila kaisgan, adi kaya restitution or reparation. Additional job functions or community service within the jail premises. Temporary or permanent cancellation of some or all recreational privileges. Reduction of visiting time. Close confinement in a cell for a period of not exceeding 7 days, pareha ra gyapon sa ganina, or transfer to another BJMP jail in the area in coordination with the court, or suspension of visiting privileges for a period not exceeding 1 month. So for a period of 1 month, dili ani siya pwede bisitahon, provided that this sanction shall not apply to the lawyer, physician, or religious minister serving the needs of the prisoners. Provided nga kaning mga tao, si lawyer, physician, or religious minister is tugutan gyapon nila nga bisitahon si inmate. Next is permanent cancellation of visiting privileges. I-cancel na gajud permanently ang iyahang visiting privileges. Di na siya pwede dito bisitahon. With respect to persons not included in the definition of immediate family under RA 7438. So, kung immediate family ka, pwede ra ka niya mo bisita. Pero pag friends ra kan mo, nga na, or distant relative na ka, pwede na nga dili na ka pabisitahan. Provided that this sanction shall not apply to any lawyer, physician, or religious minister serving the needs of the prisoner. In addition to the above-mentioned punishment, the disciplinary board may recommend to the warden partial or full forfeiture of good conduct time allowance to be earned for a particular month and subsequent months depending upon the gravity of the offense. So, ang mga detainees na to, pwede na sila ng GCTA. Pwede nga minusan ang ilahang adlaw sa ilahang sentences. Kung pila magani ka years or months ang ilahang sentensya, as long as they do good conduct inside the jail. So, pwede nga kaning si disciplinary board is mo recommend sila dito sa warden nga, hey warden, please adyaw na ni hatagi or adyo na ni siya i-grant ng good conduct time allowance kay di gadyo ni siya madaya gahi gadyo ka radyo to be earned in particular month or subsequent months. So wala na siya GCTA, di na ma-minusan ng iyahang sentensya. Next is limitations on disciplinary punishment for inmates. So the disciplinary board shall consider the following limitations when imposing disciplinary punishment. So when you impose punishment to a prisoner or to a detainee, napod na si limitation. Dili pwede nga tungod kay ikaw ang chairman sa disciplinary board, hatagan na nimo siya ng ingani na dili ka dapat justifiable or reasonable nga mga sanction. So So, no female inmate shall be subjected to any disciplinary punishment which might affect her unborn or nursing child. So, kung kani nga inmate nga nakasaya sa balaod inside the jail is pregnant, dili pwede nimo siya hatagan ng disciplinary punishment nga makaapekto sa ijahang anak or sa ijahang, although din is buntis, like nanganak na siya pero naa pa sa ijang baby, dili pwedeng hatagan nimo siya punishment nga makadaot sa ijahang anak. No infirm or handicapped offender shall be meted out punishment which might affect his or her health or physical well-being. So, dili sad pwede nga kaning mga inmates kina ay sakit or handicap kana ang naikampansanan is imo silang hatagan og punishment nga makasamot na hinuon sa ilahang sitwasyon. So, for example, if kani nga tawo is depressed or suicidal and then imo siyang gihatagan ng isolation not exceeding 7 days. So, basi inside the jail, inside that cell, nagpakamatay na hinuon siya. So, also, ang disciplinary board will have to be careful with those kind of cases. Next is corporal punishment. Next, corporal punishment, confinement in dark or inadequate ventilated cells, and any form of cruel, unusual, inhumane, or degrading punishment are absolutely prohibited. So, dili nimo siya pwede ibutang sa Bartolina. Kanang grabe ka ngit-ngit nga dili nakaginhawa ang inmate. So, dili na siya pwede. Kay inhumane man na siya nga mode of punishing the person. So, dili na siya pwede. When necessary, the jail physician shall visit the detainee or prisoner undergoing a punishment and shall advise the warden of the need for the termination of the punishment imposed upon the inmate on grounds of the inmate's physical or mental health. So, si physician tanaw ni kay base ang punishment nga gihatag sa inmate is nakadaot sa inmate pagsamot. So, pwede nga ang physician is mag-recommend kang assistant warden or the chair of the board nga pwede ba nga i-lift na nato ang punishment nga gihatag kang prisoner or kang inmate. Instruments of restraint such as handcuffs, leg irons, and straitjackets are not to be applied as a form of punishment. They shall only be used as a precaution against escapes and on medical grounds to prevent an offender from injuring himself or others. Dili pwede nga imo sidyang i-restrain bitaw. Dili pwede nga imo sidyang i-handcuff, talion ijahang kamot or ijahang tiil para dili siya makawala and maka-transgress again ng another rules inside the jail. Kay himuon na nimo kung kana nga tawo is prone to siya for escaping o di kaya kana ang harmful na siya sa ijang kaugalingon or sa other inmates. So, dili na pwede. Nahatagan nimo siya ng restraint. And then, breaches of discipline shall be handled without anger or emotionalism, and decisions shall be executed firmly and justly. So, kinahanglan ang board kung maghatag sila og disciplinary sanction sa isa ka inmate, kinahanglan they do that for the purpose of professionalism and for justice. So, dili pwede nga tungod kay naglagot na sila ng nga tawo or because of their emotion narabog so ng damdamin kaya binigay nila na nga punishment sa isa ka inmate. As a general rule, any violation of jail rules and regulations or misconduct committed by the inmate shall be dealt with accordingly. In extreme cases where the violation necessitates immediate action, the warden or the officer of the day may administer the necessary restraints and report the action he or she has taken to the disciplinary board. Procedures in the hearing of disciplinary cases. So, the following procedures shall be followed in the hearing of disciplinary cases. So of course di man pwedeng hatagan na nimo sila og immediate punishment. Kinahanglan man anay moagi ng due process so that mapatunayan that this person this inmate really committed transgression of the rules and regulations inside the jail. The aggrieved inmate or any person, visitor, inmate, or personnel reports the violation to the desk officer. So kung kinsa man gani ang aggrieved party nga nakahimo ng saya o nahimuan ng saya by the inmate, kinahanglan i-report na nila dito ra sa desk officer. Si desk officer ang pinakauna makahibayo sa violation nga gi-commit ni inmate. The desk officer shall immediately submit a written report to the warden, and the warden shall direct the investigation unit to conduct an investigation within 24 hours. So kung naanay complaint against that inmate, kinahanglan si warden will make a written report that authorizes the investigation unit to conduct an investigation nga dapat within 24 hours ra. So upon receipt of the directive, the investigation unit shall submit to the warden their report together with their recommendations. So after nila mag-investigate ang investigation unit, mag-submit na sila ng report sa warden regarding their recommendations. The warden shall evaluate the report, and if he or she believes that there is no sufficient evidence to support the alleged violation, he or she shall dismiss the case. So, kung maya man day enough evidence nga nagpapatunay na this inmate committed a crime, then ijang i-dismiss ang kaso. If he or she believes that sufficient evidence exists, he or she shall decide the case. The warden will decide the case and impose the necessary penalty in case of minor violations. So, take note nga minor violations ra ang pwede ni hatagan ng necessary penalty. If the offense is less grave or grave, kung maabot na ganig less grave or grave ang isa ka offense ng gihiwan inmate, he or she shall endorse it to the disciplinary board for hearing or decide it himself or herself as in his or her capacity as summary disciplinary officer in the absence of a disciplinary board. Pwede rasad nga si Jang mag-hear and decide for the hearing or trying the case of the inmate kung walay kung absent ang disciplinary board. So take note nga minor violations ra ang pwede wherein pwede ang warden nga maghimo ng iyahang penalty or impose ng necessary penalty to the inmate. The inmate shall be confronted of the reported violation and asked how he or she pleads to the charge. Sa pangutanon si nga either ni disciplinary board or ni warden nga tinuod ba ni allegation sa imo nga imo ning gihimo ingani. So if he or she admits the violation or pleads guilty, the board of the warden or the warden, as the case may be, shall impose the corresponding authorized disciplinary action. If the inmate denies the charge, kung i-deny na ni inmate, a summary hearing shall be held giving the opportunity for both parties to present their testimonies and those of their witnesses, if any, and to present evidence to shed light on the case. So kung ma-deny si inmate nga, uy, man na gihimo, yaman ko na nag-transgress nga kuan balaod inside the jail. Yaman ko nag-commit ang less grave or light offense inside the jail. So, kung ingana man gani, kailangan mag-present ka ng testimony or evidences ang both parties, ang aggrieved party and the offender, nga kanimo ni ang tinuod nga nahitabo. So, after hearing, the board shall decide with the merits of the case as basis. So, ang mag-decide ani is the board. So, kung unsa man gadget ang kamatuuran upon the investigation, the hearing, kung unsa man ang decision ng board, whether the inmate is found guilty ba or not. So, he or she should be advised to obey the rules and regulations strictly and be reminded that good behavior is indispensable for his or her early release and or the granting of privileges. Decisions of the board are subject to review and approval by the warden, whose decision should be final and executory. So, ang decision kuno ng board are subject to the review and approval by the warden. I-review na and i-approve na ni warden. Once na na decision, then final na siya and executory. So, here are the punishable acts of the inmates. So, gina-classify na nato sila as minor offenses, less grave offenses, and the grave offenses. So, I hope that you have read na ani nga mga offenses na pwedeng i-commit ni inmate inside the jail. Nanay sa inyong libro. Any personnel, especially warden, found to be following and tolerating any violation mentioned above will be immediately relieved from his or her designation without prejudice to his or her being administratively charged. Then, modes and guidelines for release. So, the following modes and guidelines shall be observed when the inmates are to be released from the detention. So, kung humana ang sentensya nga giserve ni inmate, then mo ni ang ato ang guidelines for their release. So, ang inmate may be released through the service of sentence. Mao na ni ang pamaagi nga ma-release na to ang isa ka inmate. So, either humana siya serve sa iyang sentence, either na-order ng court nga palayaon siya, gigrantan siya og parole, gihatagan siya og pardon ni president, and gigrantan siya og amnesty. So, mao na nga mga reasons wherein makagawas si inmate or si prisoner. Before an inmate is released, before ko siya release, he or she shall be properly identified to ensure that he or she is the same person received and is subject for release. Kinahanglan ni identify anay nga kani si Juan ba is mao ni nga same nga person who was subject for release by the court, and his or her marks and fingerprints shall be verified and those taken when he or she was received. Any changes or differences in his or her distinguished marks and scars shall be investigated to ascertain his or her real identity in order to prevent the mistaken release of another person. Kay basig masaya sila nga, uy, kamukha raman ni sila di man din mo ang tinuod nga inmate nga kinahanglan nato pagawson sa prisuhan. No inmate shall be released on a mere verbal order or an order relayed via telephone. The release of an inmate by reason of acquittal, dismissal of case, payment of fines and or the indemnity, or filing of bond shall take effect only upon receipt of the release order reserved by the court process server. So, timan-an lamang nato nga dili pwede nga atong pagawson ng isa ka inmate tungod kay nay order from verbal o di kaya nitawag ang kuan korte. So, dili pwede nga si judge matawag dito nga, uy pa, gawsan na si kuan kay laya na siya. Dili na siya pwede. Kinahanglan na sila ma-receive nga order gajud, physically, written, nga this person is subject for release. The court order shall bear the full name of the inmate, the crime he or she was charged with, the criminal case number, and such other details that will enable the officer in charge to properly identify the inmate to be released. Upon proper verification from the court of the authenticity of the order, an inmate shall be released promptly and without unreasonable delay. So, kung na-verify na nila nga this person is the same as to be released, then di na silang padugay-dugay pa, ilan na lang pagawsan. Under proper receipt, all money earned, other valuables held and entrusted by the inmate upon admission shall be returned to him or her upon release. So, di ba, kay ang si inmate, kung magtrabaho siya inside the prison or the jail, na sila earned money, ma-earn nga money or makuha ang kwarta dito gikan sa ilang pagpanarbaho sa sayod. So, tanan ija ng kuwaon, makuha na niya, dili na niya ibilin. And then, ijang mga belongings bitaw, katong before si Jackie admit sa jail, ija tong makuha. The released inmate shall be issued a certification of discharge from jail by the warden or his or her authorized representative. So, maani ang procedure on releasing. These procedure shall be observed. One is the desk officer. So, upon receipt of the release order, kung na release order, the desk officer shall coordinate with the paralegal officer for verification of the authenticity of said order. So, si desk officer, ijaan ay i-verify kang paralegal officer if tinuod ba gajud or authentic ba ni nga order. And then si paralegal officer will verify the authenticity of the release order. Next is the records or the admin officer. So, si records or admin officer starts processing inmates release. So, iyan ang i-process ang pag-release ang paglaya ni inmate. So, iyang i-check ang record ni inmate to ensure that the data in the release order coincide with the data in the inmate's carpeta. For example, kanang mga simple ragod ng mga details, mga spelling ng pangayan, mga offense, and also most importantly is the criminal case number of the inmate. Then iyang i-check that the inmate has no other pending cases. Kung maya na ba yung other pending cases, kay basi na pa na siya other nga na pa na siya pending nga case. Kung naa pa, of course, di pa na siya pwede pagawson. Routes the release paper to different signatories. So, kung kinsa pa'y kinahanglan nga papirmahon na ni records officer. Then, si property custodian naman checks the receipt of property and returns to the inmate his or her deposited items. Makes sure that returned items of the inmate are duly received and properly recorded. Desk officer, iyang i-record ang release ni inmate and the condition of the inmate upon his or her release. So, iyang i-record dito if well ba or unwell ang isa ka inmate upon paggawas niya. Then, si jail warden will report to the concerned agencies or persons the release of inmate for aftercare program. So, ang atong rehabilitation process manggod is does not only happen inside the jail but also outside the jail. So naatay ginatawag nga aftercare program. So bisan pa og human na sila, gina-monitor gyapon na sila kay para gud ma-ensure na dili na sila mag-commit ng another crime. Upon release of the inmate, the warden shall notify the following agencies or the person. So, ang barangay captain, priest, or religious minister, mandatory sila nga inform. Family, if walay family niya dito nga witness sa iyang release, and the court in case of convicted inmate. So, kung convicted si inmate, pahibayan na nato si ang court or the judge nga, uy, kani si Juan is nakalaya na siya. Next is the treatment of inmates with special needs. So, under rule number 4, the United Nations Standard Minimum Rules for the Treatment of Prisoners provide that so far as possible, separate institutions or separate sections of an institution shall be used for the treatment of the different classes of prisoners. So the BJMP has adhered to his principles since its creation. However, the rise in criminality in recent years, coupled with the passage of more stringent laws, especially for drug-related offenses, and the adoption of better crime solution methods, resulted in a marked increase in inmate population in BJMP detention centers. So the lack of funds to expand existing jails or to build new ones aggravates the situation. This rule therefore provides guidance to wardens and jail officers treating unusual inmates or those with special needs given the limited resources. So, dili na tumalikayan nga inside the jail, nagad tayong mga inmate na nagad sila yung mga ginadaya nga gibati. So, physically or mentally or by age, baka nana sila mga illnesses or mga sakit. So, napud tayo special protection or in special security against these personnel or for these prisoners. So, as a general rule, inmates with special needs should not be held in jails with other regular inmates. So generally kuno kinahanglan dili magtibo ang regular inmate and kadtong mga naay special needs na mga inmate. For example, mga babae imong itibo sa layaki, dili na siya pwede. However, kuno, given the reality relative to budget constraints, kung gamay ra gud ang budget nga di nato sila mahatagan ng separate institutions, increasing inmate population or insufficient facilities, for example, and inadequate equipped detention homes, wardens and jail officers shall endeavor to provide the best arrangement they can make for such inmates in keeping with this rule. So bisan pa og gamay ra ang kanaang ang budget, kinahanglan gyud kuno nga dapat si warden og ang ijahang mga kauban, jail officers, mangita silang paagi para ma-separate ni or mahimo gyud ni nga treatment dynamics inside the jail. It is assumed that the inmates have been properly evaluated and classified for this purpose. So, handling inmates with special needs. So, the following guidelines shall be observed in handling inmates with special needs. So, money ang sa mga babae, female inmates. So, no need na nga isa-isa kung pa na nato sila. It's because it is already present in your book. The reason nga nung waya na ako nag-discuss sa ijo ini na mga butang is because they are sadyon ra sila masabtan. Sadyon ra sila masabtan. Manang dili na necessary. It is not necessary nga ako paning isa-isa sa ijo pag klase. Kay masabda naman na ninyo, dili naman mo kung mga elementary. So, please, basahara ka ninyo sa inyong libro. Then, rule number 5. The custody, security, and control, emergency plans, movement, and transfer of prisoners and detainees. So, jail management and penology is concerned with the humane safekeeping and development of inmates. Effective custody ensures that inmates are well secured in all areas in detention facility and properly escorted when attending their court hearings and other authorized lawful destinations. So, this rule focuses on effective safekeeping. So, the main reason man, diba, while we commit the inmates is because of safekeeping. So, the BJMP will ensure talaga nga they're well kept inside the jail and di sila basta-basta makawala, di sila basta-basta maka-harm sa ilang kaugalingan and the other persons surrounding them. That's why it was included in the BJMP Manual. So, for Section 35, the custody, security, and control. Each jail shall, as much as practicable, maintain the following minimum standards with regard to security of the facility. So, an established security perimeter in every jail. There shall be a defined controlled security perimeter. So, a secured office for personnel, a secured visiting area for inmates visitor, a secured multi-purpose area for inmates activities, and an area for livelihood activities, armory and storage lockers for inmates' valuable items and other equipment, operational closed-circuit television or CCTV, strategically mounted to monitor jail premises and all activities therein, a two-way communication system to be used by the officer of the day, supervisor, desk officer, and other personnel on duty, and equipment necessary to sustain operability of utilities, communication, security, and fire protection equipment at all times. So, katuraning mga areas where needed na kinahanglan present sa isa ka jail or facility. Next, to ensure that minimum standards in security and control are maintained, the following policies, guidelines, and procedures shall be strictly implemented in all jail facilities. So, each newly admitted inmate shall be thoroughly searched for weapons and other contraband immediately upon arrival in the facility. So, that's why we have a gator. Kaya ang gator mo na responsible for the strip and search inspection, di ba, of the inmate and the committing officer. So, dito pa lamang daan, sa gate pa lamang daan, gina-check na gadget kung naabay mga kontrabandos ni mga butang nga dili pwede makasakit inside nga gidaya ni inmate or the committing officer inside the jail. All inmates must be searched thoroughly by the duty personnel whenever they enter or leave the security areas. So, before transfer or after transfer of the inmate, kinahanglan tan-awon anay nila kung basignaan is gihawiran nga mga contraband or mga armors or weapons nga ijahang gamiton against a personnel in escorting him or her. Tan-awon na ng security officers. Conduct surprise searches on inmates and inspection of their quarters and other areas accessible to inmates at least once a week to detect and flush out contraband. So, kinahanglan i-inspect na sila sa ilahang quarters or areas or mga areas nga na ang inmate maka-access ang inmate at least once a week. So, pinakagamay ang once. Ang one, pinakagamay ang kaisa mag-inspect sa isa ka week. Maintain an updated written emergency operations plans such as, but not limited to, natural and man-made calamities and other jail disturbances. So these plans must be made known to and understood by the jail personnel through the conduct of regular dry runs. So kinahanglan na i-plan nga mga emergency exits or emergency planning nga kailangan nilang buhaton kay aron kung in case na mahitabo nga something, disturbance or incident inside the jail, easy ra nila ma-contain, easy ra nila ma-handle. Maintain a journal of activities, emergency situation, and unusual incidents. Maintain a key control center for storing keys that is inaccessible to inmates and unauthorized persons. There shall be an accounting system for issuing and returning of keys. There shall be a reporting system for documenting and repairing broken or malfunctioning keys or locks. Inmates shall be prohibited from handling jail security keys. So, kinahanglan ang kaniang ilahang mga keys, ilahang mga yabi na sila storage unit as to asa man ipamutang. Kinahanglan before na i-turn over kung kinsa man gani ang duty karon nga adlaw, karon nga shift, dapat mabilang na. Kung naamang gani mga guba, kinahanglan alis na immediately or mag-change na sila within a period of 6 months. There shall be one full set of duplicate keys secured in a place accessible only to jail personnel for use in the event of an emergency. So these keys shall be marked for easy identification during adverse conditions. So dapat na i-duplicate na ang nakahibayo ra ang mga jail officers ra kay in case nga na emergency, easy accessible ra nila na makuha. Continuous inspection and maintenance of all locks. Replace locks as often as possible and never allow inmate to install locking systems in the cell gates and to possess their own padlock for purposes of locking themselves in their cells that will cause delay for personnel conducting a regular cell search and inspection. So, very important nga mag-conduct na sila ng maintenance sa ilahang mga locks kay base sila na hinuan ang mapadlakan nakagawas ng inmate ang sila nasa ilayom. Maintaining strict control of firearms such as but not limited to the following. Very important gadget nga when it comes to firearms, since it's very dangerous for the inmates, is di na nila ma-access. Morning kinahanglan malimit ra ang firearms nga dayhon ng isa ka inmate or available inside the jail. So, never allow any personnel with firearms on areas of inmates and or in any area intended for inmates activities. So, kung kabayo ka as a personnel nga nadaray mga inmates, bawal ka magdaya ng firearm. Mabitan nang ang mga BJMP personnel nato, waya na sila daya nga mga pusil kung na sila inside, labi na pag na-inmates kay basig kwao na pag pagkalit sa inmate, mapusila na hinoon sila. Never allow inmates in the workplace of personnel or in areas where firearms are authorized. Of course, kung na mga firearm dira nga area, nga office, bawal gajud ang inmate, maski na og makasaligan pa na nga inmate. Bawal si dira nga area. Secure firearms and anti-riot equipment in the armory located within easy reach of jail personnel in case of emergencies but not accessible to inmates. Kinahanglan ang kanang area wherein asa dapit ang mga armors or anti-riot nga equipment is ang maka-access ra easily ang mga jail personnel, dili ko ang mga inmates. Dapat ang mga jail inmates waya sila kabayo kung asa na gipang butang. All firearms, ammunition, chemical agents, related security and emergency equipment must be inventoried and tested at least quarterly or determined their condition and expiration dates as the case may be. So this shall include regular inspection of fire extinguishers and other detection and suppression systems available. All toxic, corrosive, and flammable substances and other potentially dangerous supplies and equipment shall be stored in a locked area which is secured and located outside the inmate's security. So, kaning nga mga tools, supplies, and equipment which are particularly hazardous shall be used by inmates only under direct supervision. Conduct daily inspection. So, kinahanglan daily gina-inspect ang all areas inside the facility. Mga closed circuit, television, CCTV, ceilings, pasinaan na dito sa taas, window grills, iron bars, basi loose na, and etc. and document all findings. So any tampering or defects detected must be reported in writing to proper authority for immediate action. Regular conduct of guard mounting. So for all incoming duty of the custodial unit and for the members of the escort unit before their assumption of duty to remind and update them of the policies, guidelines pertaining to security and control. So conduct regular count of inmates. Kinahanglan regular ang pag-count ng inmate nga at least 5 to 6 times within 24-hour period. So grabe na ka-importante nga kinahanglan daw at least ka 5 to 6 times per 24 hours. So imagine kapila na sila count. So pagmata, pagkaon, pag-uli, before matuyog, pagajay labot dira ang kanang surprise inspection. Personnel conducting the count shall record the result. Prohibit inmates visitor to stay inside jail premises beyond unauthorized visiting period regardless of any reason. So bawal kasi garadyaw ang bisita sa inmate nga pasudlo ni sa cell or inside the jail premises. Kinahanglan dito ra sa visiting area. Inmates shall be supervised at all times whenever they are outside their cell. Never allow any personnel under the influence of intoxicating beverages to enter the jail facility or to perform an official duty. Na bawal kasi garadyaw nga mo duty ang isa ka personnel nga hubog si Ja. Bawal nga hubog si Ja tungod kay basi na hinuha pagawson ni jang mga inmate. Carefully select the inmates to be utilized as jail aid and maintain rigid control over their activities. So, namagod na sila yung mga jail aid. Kinahanglan, you need to be careful with your selection kung kinsa manggani ang imong pilion nga masaligan inside the jail as a jail aid. Kay, although buotan na sila, pero still, gina-consider gyapon nato sila nga inmates. Never allow inmate to be utilized for any janitorial services at jail offices, restricted areas, and for errands outside the jail premises. Bawal nimo silang patrabahuon in the personnel area. Bawal nimo sila pahinloon or padagan-daganon dito sa gawas kung na kay sugo kay mga inmate man na sila. In no case shall no inmate be allowed to perform clerical duties or to have access to personal files and other official documents. Na grabe nakabawal, of course, nga makabayo sila ng mga documents dira kay very confidential man ang mga dokumento. Never allow a jail officer to render successive shifts of duty except in cases of emergencies. Dili pwede na successive ang duty sa isa ka personnel. For example, ang ilahang duty is 8 hours. So dili pwede nga kani nga shift ikaw ani mag-duty and then the next shift ikaw gihapon tungod kay bayan ni puli sa imo. So dili pwede nga successive ang imuhang pag-duty. Except kung nay mga emergency. Never allow jail personnel to open inmates' quarters alone. So dili pwede nga isa ra ang mag-open ng quarter ng inmate, kinahanglan body sila. At least one other jail officer should be present and guarding the gate. Inmates should be taken out of jail only upon written order of the court. So di nimo sila pagawson gadyo sa jail kung wayay mando gikan sa korte. Ensure that all vehicles and persons entering the jail premises are properly searched in accordance with the existing policies or procedures. So nga kanang mga vehicles nga mosuyod gawas sa jail kinahanglan ma-inspect na nila dito kay basig na nagipangdaya nga unsa rakan or gigawas nga mga inmate, di ba? And then regularly inspect and check the availability of emergency lights and other emergency equipment, and ensure that each personnel rendering night shift duties has one flashlight, night stick button, and whistle. As regard to the use of force, so diri na ta sa use of force shall be limited to instances of justifiable self-defense, prevention of self-inflicted harm, protection of others, prevention of riot, commission of a crime, escape or other jail disturbances, and to controlling or subduing an inmate who refuses to obey a law, command, or order. So, maura ni nga mga circumstances wherein ang personnel is allowed to use force. Use of force shall be limited to the amount of force necessary to control a given situation. Dili pwede nga ang inmate gibuno ra gani ka og sapatos imo na dadyong gi pusil. Kinahanglan ang imo pong i-exert nga force against that inmate is necessary ra para makontrol siya or to neutralize a given situation, and shall include a continuum of escalating force levels. Mo na itong ginatawag nga force continuum. So kinahanglan kung unsa ra nga necessary nga force ang atong gamiton, dapat it should be equivalent to the force nga gihatag ni inmate. And then dili ta exert ng the highest level of force when ang force nga gihatag ra ni inmate is naraman sa ubos. So we should follow the force continuum. So kung unsa may pinakaubos nga force nga pwede natong i-exert, mao ra atong i-exert. So we need to exhaust all means before ta magamit ng the highest level of force. An examination and or treatment by health personnel shall be provided to prisoners or staff involved in a use of force incident when there is obvious physical injury or there is a complaint of injury or request for medical attention. So, next is the use of force incidents shall be recorded and reviewed by the warden. So, kailangan makabayo si warden ana. So, next is the inmates count. It is imperative that at specified times during each 24-hour period, timanin ninyo nga 5 to 6 times sila mag-count sa inmate. All inmates are physically counted. For this type of count, the general procedure are as follows. So, count each inmate kuno physically at specified times or as necessary. Kinahanglan makita nimo siya nga nag-count. So, dili pwede nga natabunan siya na ang imorang nabati is ang ijaharang boses nga nilaon sila ng 4, 5 nga na dili pwede, kailangan makita gadyo nimo ang inmate. So during the count, ensure that all movements of inmates are stopped until the count is completed. So, during the count ko no, i-ensure ko no nimo nga wayay naglingas-lingas dira, kinahanglan nakatune ra sila. The count must be accurate. Make a positive verification to ascertain that the inmates are physically present. Refrain from conducting a count on the basis of only having seen any part of his clothing, hair, or shoes. So, kinahanglan makita kasi mo siya physically. Submit a report of each count of a group of inmates to the warden and or assistant warden or the officer of the day. So, isubmit mo ang counting nila. If the total jail count does not tally with the total jail population at any given time, conduct another count. So, kung dili ganito maghahaom ang imuhang pag-count sa ila and then the record said, kailangan niyo mag-conduct ng another count. Render an immediate report to the warden or assistant warden or the officer of the day relative to any unaccounted inmate. So, kay base di ang kani nga inmate is ato siya dito sa asa nga area rakan, mangwaya sila na count. So, kinahanglan na nilang i-verify. So, kay nga nung waya man ni siya ni Sigo sa recorded inmate nga number. Next, security procedures during meal service. So, security must be considered in serving food inside the cells or quarters. So, a jail officer should not enter the inmates' quarters to distribute food unless another officer is available to handle the keys and control the entrance door. So, maski magkaon sila, of course, nagyahapon ay security. So, ang jail officer ko, no, dili pwede siya mo enter sa inmates' quarters para mag-distribute ng pagkaon. So, another officer is available dapat na mag-handle sa keys and control the entrance door. So, kung maghatag mga siya inside, dapat na ay iyang kaiban nga personnel san. We have the section 38, which is dining room security. So, for jail facilities that have separate dining or mess halls, the following shall be observed. So, kung separate ang ilahang dining facility or kanang dining room from their usual cell, mauni ang mga procedures or necessary na dapat ma-observe inside the dining room. Kay biskan pa og that is the time for meals, it is important kay i-secure gyapon nato ang mga inmates kay base dira na time plano sila nga mo-escape sila kay hamok man sila dira na area. So it is better to secure them. That's why we need to follow and observe the following. So letter A, as a general precaution, individual mess utensils of inmates shall be made of plastic. So kung mangaon sila, dapat ilang utensils, kutsara, tinidor shall be made of plastic. Kay kung kuana, metal na, aluminum ng ilahang utensils, base na chances na magnilubaay sila dito, o di kaya lubaon nila ang mga personnel, na that would be a chance for them to escape the prison. When dining rooms are provided, the inmates should march in columns of 2 along designated routes under the supervision of jail personnel. Other officials to direct the orderly movement of inmates to and from the mess hall must be stationed along the routes. So, kung naa sila sa dining hall, for example, and then mauni ang table or area wherein magkuha sila ng food, dapat naglinya sila in 2 columns. Duha ka columns. Dira ra sila pwede maglinya to get their food, and then maingkod sila as to asa nga chairs or tables ang vacant. Designate a roving supervisor to handle any disturbances or settle complaints. So, of course, while nangaon sila naga-supervise sa ila kay basta nay complaints nila or other incidents that are needing of attention. After every meal, all utensils used by the inmates should be collected. So, of course, tanan to nga utensils nila dapat kolektahon sa supervisor. Jail personnel should strictly supervise this to ensure that no utensils are brought out the dining the dining room. So kinahanglan nga makuha na nila from the inmates kay aron ma-prevent nila nga ang mga utensils dadon dito sa isig ka selda ng bawat prisoner. Kay basi mao toy ilang himuon nga pang scrape, pang grave para maka-eskapo. Check and account for all forks, spoons, and other kitchen utensils after every meal. So kinahanglan nimo i-check and bilangon kung pila ka buok ang gi-distribute and gibalik. Next is mail services and censorship. So mail service kana bitawng letters or messages shall be provided to all inmates provided that all outgoing and incoming mail matters are passed through a designated censor officer in order to intercept any contraband or illegal articles and any informal affecting the security of the jail. So kung of course di magajud na malikayan nga naa gajud mga message, mga suyat nga moabot sa mga inmates kay for example kana ilang mga pamilya, ilang mga friends or kinsarakan, it is important kana sila censor officer para mag-check ana nga mga letters kay base ang gipang suyat dira ang letter is escape plan or unsa ra kan nga information that will jeopardize the procedures inside the jail. So it is important to intercept also in contraband or base na sila islip through dito nga mga small sachets of shabu or drugs baka ha. So much better nga tan-awon na ng isa ka censor officer. The following procedures should be strictly observed when censoring mail. So there shall be no limitation on the amount of incoming or outgoing mail or correspondence when the inmates are responsible for the costs of postage. So pwede ra maski pila pa dyaon ang ilang ihatag or ilang ipadaya nga suyat or moabot sa ilang nga suyat as long as si inmate siya ang responsible nga magbayad sa kanang postal bitaw. Grabe man na ka mahal pa sa una. Di siya mahal but nana siya bayad for the postal, for the delivery. So nana siya bayad. Pwede ra maski pila ka letters sa ipadaya ng inmate or pila ka letters ang maabot sa ija as long as siya ang magbayad ana. Incoming inmates mail, correspondence and packages shall be opened and inspected to intercept cash, checks, money orders, and contraband. The censor officer shall observe the documentary procedures in disposing of interceptive items. So kinahanglan tan-aw nila kung basi na mga packages, mail, parcel nga moabot sa inmate, tan-aw nila basi na gipadaya dira nga mga kontrabando. So kung na magani makita, well, kailangan nila mo follow ang personnel sa jail, mo follow sa procedures in handling those contraband items. Legal mail or correspondence shall be opened and inspected in the presence of the inmate to intercept contraband. Kinahanglan nga while inspectioning the letters or packages nga para sa inmate, kinahanglan na ang inmate while the officer is while ang officer is nag-check sa kung unsa may suyod sa mail or the package. Mails shall not be distributed to the inmates until the censors have examined them. Mail shall only be opened and searched by qualified, trained, and authorized jail personnel in the presence of inmate addressee. So any currency, checks, or money found in the letter should be turned over to the trust officer or the property custodian. So kung na may makita dito nga mga kwarta or any things of value, ihato na nila ihatag sa property custodian or the trust officer. The receiving officer should indicate the amount received on a receipt form in duplicate. The original receipt signed by the receiving officer should be kept or for the record, and the duplicate copy should be given to the inmate. Carefully examine all greeting cards and collect fillers of any kind found therein for laboratory examination. Photographs that are clearly within the scope of jail regulations should be marked on the opposite side and placed in the envelope. Bring to the warden's attention any item or correspondence or enclosure that does not conform to regulations or are detrimental to security, order, and discipline of the jail. In the censoring of males, prison slang, unusual nicknames, and sentences with double meanings should be carefully studied and analyzed to determine the real meanings. Kay base ba dya encrypted or kana ang nasilaisan language nga or sana language nga only known to the inmates and the sender or the receiver of the letters. So kinahanglan na nila ma-intercept. Refer to the warden on letters containing statements concerning the security or reputation of the jail, like attempts to escape or smuggling, trafficking of contraband, and statements that may affect existing rules and policies. All letters passing through the scrutiny standards of the censor should bear the censor stamp at the top of each page and on the envelope. So the letter should be placed back in the same envelope, and resealed and given to the inmate. A listing of mail for inmates should be properly kept and form part of the record of the jail. So do not discuss the contents of inmates' mail with other jail personnel except for official purposes. So kay tawo man gyapon na sila, of course they will need privacy regarding their letters, their messages. Kaya if you are the censor officer, strictly gajud gina-observe ang privacy ng isa ka inmate. The inmate sending out any mail matter shall open his mail or package and have it read and inspected by the designated censor officer. If the mail is clear for dispatch, the inmate shall close and seal the mail and place the same in the outgoing mailbox. If the outgoing or incoming mail has contraband or harmful information, such matter shall be registered as violation of jail rules and regulations and should be brought before the disciplinary board for immediate adjudication. The designated jail staff shall collect the inmates' mail matters on a daily basis, Monday through Friday. So inmates' letters or any other mail matter shall be sent as registered, certified, stamped, or marked via special delivery if he or she so desires at his or her expense. So the letters will be processed in accordance with the procedures in handling mails. An inmate under disciplinary segregation shall be allowed full correspondence privileges unless his or her conduct involves a serious violation of correspondence regulation. So if na amang gani mahimo nga kana ang violation ang isa ka inmate inside the jail nga involved ang mga letters or packages, then mawaya na niya nga privileges. So probably for the next days or years or months, dili na siya maka-receive and dili na siya makahatag ng letters. Tungod kay lagi ija manggi violate ang rules inside the jail. Next is movement or transfer of inmates. So prisoners or detainees may be moved or transferred safely and humanely by trained personnel who shall adopt the necessary level of security, supervision, and control to ensure public safety under specific circumstances outlined below. So ang mga inmates, dili man malikayan nga pwede silang i-move or i-transfer, especially if i-transfer sila sa other facilities. So it is important na natay escort personnel na trained sila to handle unnecessary behaviors of the inmates or di kaya emergency situations nga ilahang ma-face while transferring the inmate. So letter A, subject to the conditions set forth in the succeeding sections and by virtue of an appropriate court order, an inmate may be brought out of jail under any of the following instances. So kinahanglan kung i-transfer man gani or igawas ang inmate, dapat gajud na ay court order. Gikan sa korte ang order. Kinahanglan, it is by letter, it is by paper, dili pwede nga tawag ra. So kinahanglan na ay court order nga authentic. So to appear as witness before any court of justice or prosecutor's office during preliminary investigation, arraignment, or hearing of a criminal case. So makagawas ra kuno si inmate kung himuon siya nga witness in their preliminary investigation, arraignment, or hearing sa kaso. Next, to appear as witness in any investigation or formal inquiry being conducted by a government agency. So for example, kana ang mga probe nga atong ginahimo sa Senado, kanang ato ang mga tawo nga nadakpan na, for example si Alice Guo, nakagawas gihapon siya sa prisuhan because she was a witness, person of interest pud siya man ang gipagawas siya sa court. Tungod kay kailangan niya mag-undergo ng formal inquiry. So, kay sa Senado man gihimo, it was called as probe na sa inyong investigation sa CDI. So, to view the remains of a deceased relative within the second degree of affinity or consanguinity. So, pwede siya makagawas ko with pahintulot from the court to view ko the remains of a deceased relative. So, kinahanglan ka na nga relative is within the second degree of affinity or consanguinity ranimo. So, kinsa man imong mga second degree nga relative. So, ang imong second degree nga relative is ang imong first degree relative kanang si mama nimo, imong papa, imong grandparents, kinsa pa, imong mama, imong papa, imong mga igsuon, siblings, imong niece, kanang pag-umangko nimo or nephew. So kana ra sila mao ra nay pwede nga imong duawon kung mapatay sila. And pwede pud nimo duawon ang imong anak, kanang imong anak, imong child, imong grandchild. So pwede sad. So pwede sad kung ang by affinity, kung mayon mo tag consanguinity, it means your relative by blood. Kung mayon tag by affinity, your relative by law. So for example, if you are married with your partner, pwede nimo duawon ang ijahang mga relative nga within the second degree ra gihapon niya. So pwede na siya to undergo medical examination or treatment in a hospital or clinic. So pwede sad nga kung dili siya satisfied or dili maka-provide ng medical officer or medical facility ang jail, pwede siya mogawas for medical examination or treatment in a hospital or clinic. So of course, ang bayad ana, since if it is private, ang magbayad gid ana is the family of the inmate or the inmate. Next, an inmate may be transferred to another institution only upon specific order of the court having jurisdiction over him or her, except in cases of serious illness where hospitalization is necessary, and the inmate has to be immediately taken to the nearest hospital upon recommendation of health officer. So, di ka kuno siya pwede in-transfer kung sa other institutions maski unsay mahitabo. Unless kung nasakit ang inmate and then kinahanglan na gyud niya adto sa hospital kay kundi siya maadto mapatay siya. In this case, the jail warden or in his or her absence, the officer in charge shall immediately notify the regional director and the court concerned within 6 hours after the inmate is brought to the hospital or within 6 hours from the first hour of the following day, based on the BJMP revised policy on hospitalization and death of inmates in July 2010. So, kinahanglan pag nagawas na siya within 6 hours, na-notify na ni jail warden ang regional director nga nigigawas ni nato si inmate number 1 tungod kay kinahanglan niya na magpa-hospital. In the case of inmates classified as high risk or high profile and detained in small and remote jail facilities or in jails not considered as high security facility, their transfer to a better secure jail shall be effected provided a prior request is made from the executive judge who has administrative supervision over the court in the place where the jail in which the inmate is detained for his or her immediate action, approval, and notification to the court's proceeding judge. So, kinahanglan ko kung ang kaning atong mga inmates are high risk or high profile and then sa kana nga facility is inadequate bitaw in giving the security that is needing by these inmates, so kinahanglan man nato i-transfer. So kinahanglan mag-request anay ang executive judge na may nag-decide sa iyahang kaso. In any emergency like riot or other jail disturbance that happens on a weekend and when the immediate transfer to the other BJMP man jails of inmates involved is necessary to ensure the safety of other inmates and security of the jail, the warden, under such compelling situation, can recommend to the regional director, verbally or in writing, their immediate transfer to another jail, provided that on the first hour of the following working day, the court concerned must be informed of the said transfer and a commitment order must be issued. Otherwise, the return of the transferred inmates is imperative. Provided, however, that those inmates who instigated and led and those involved in the disturbance or violence, disruptive and or riotous actions so created shall be classified as high-risk detainees and shall be immediately transferred to a more secured facility in accordance with the immediate preceding paragraph. So, for example, kung ang na jail disturbances inside the jail, if kinahanglan ka jud i-transfer na ang inmates, although it is weekend, kinahanglan ka jud ang jail warden mag-notify sa korte nga kinahanglan nila to silang i-balis. It's because na ay emergency or na ay jail disturbance nga nahitabo inside. The same classification shall be applied to inmates who have escaped, attempted to escape, or committed acts to facilitate an escape from custody. So, be demonstrated physically or sexually assaulted behavior resulting to either attempt to sexually assault a person, serious physical injury, or death of any person, assaulted or attempted to assault another with a deadly weapon, compelled or attempted to compel another to perform sexual acts, engage in sexual conduct or sexual contact, or submit to sexual contact, all by means of force or threat of force, or compelled to coerce another by force or threat of serious physical harm or death to provide anything of value, to perform any act, or to violate any statute or jail rule. So, ingat to gihapon ang himo ni jail warden, kailangan gihapon niya mag-notify sa korte nga kani nga mga tawo they are really violent inside the jail, so kinahanglan nato sila i-transfer. So, although it is weekend, they need to notify the region and the court nga kani nga mga tawo nga inmates ato ning ipang transfer so that i-allow ni korte or ni judge nga these people will be transferred and mogawa sila sa jail. Inmates who wish to view the remains of a deceased relative within the second degree of consanguinity or affinity and whose motion for that purpose was approved by the court as proven by a valid court order issued to the warden shall be required to submit a written request to the warden at least 3 days before the date of viewing, and which request should be accompanied by the following documents. So, kung ang inmate is gusto niya mo view sa isa ka relative nga namatay nga within second degree ra niya, kinahanglan ani siya maghimo ng request dito sa korte ng at least 3 days before the date of the viewing. So, kinahanglan before ka mukadto sa namatay ni mga relative, kinahanglan naka-request anay sa court, kailangan na naasay valid court order nga ihatag ni korte, and which request should be accompanied by the following documents. So, kinahanglan upon request naasa ni sila present, naasay death certificate ng tao nga namatay nga imong relative, and then certificate as indicated after the name of the deceased relative. So, to wit, the spouse, children, father or mother, mga dokumento nga nakapatunay nga kato nga deceased relative is actually your relative. So, kung spouse to nimo, kinahanglan na inyuhang marriage certificate. Kung children, ay birth certificate ang bata. Kung father or mother nimo, imuhang birth certificate. Kung brother or sister nimo, ilahang birth certificate and your certificate. Grandparent nimo, kinahanglan na ay certificate dito sa imong hapong parent, kinahanglan sa to nimo ipakita. Your grandchild, kinahanglan birth certificate of the inmate and his or her child who is the parent of the deceased grandchild. So, ano ang mga documents ang kinahanglan i-provide ni inmate when he or she wishes to view the deceased relative. Then, dapat na sketch map kinahanglan pa kuno ng sketch map of the place where the remains lie at in state. So kinahanglan na sketch map na kabutang dito nga kung asa dapit ang lubong, asa dapit ang jail, para matanaw nila pila man ka hours unsa may agihan, kay base ang agihan dito secluded area, di kaya na possibility nga atngan i-ambush ang vehicle, ang transfer vehicle, and then kuhaon nila ang inmate, patyon ang mga personnel para makalaya ang inmate. So kinahanglan na nila tan-awon. Immediately upon receipt of the court order and with the inmate's written request yet to be submitted, the warden shall order the jail intelligence unit the jail warden iyang i-order ang jail intelligence unit na mag-conduct ng reconnaissance. Kung may tag-reconnaissance, that is an investigation nga himuon ng officer to view a certain area. If kana nga area ba is pwede kandakan ng operation. So in this matter, the jail intelligence unit will see to it that this area is safe for the inmates and the personnels for the inmate to view the deceased. In the area where the remains of the deceased still lie in state, to assess any threat against the inmate or his security escort, to locate the place of burial, and to conduct route survey to establish a safer and better route for the escorts. In case of Muslim inmates, kung Muslim ko na ang inmate, it shall be ascertained whether the date indicated in the court order for the inmate or inmates to view the remains the deceased relatives within 24 hours from the time the death of his or her relatives. So kung Muslim ang good daw is 24 hours ra ilubong na daw. So kinahanglan it shall be ascertained nga ang date indicated in the court order of the inmate or the inmates to view the remains of the deceased. So the time of the death of his or her relative. So kinahanglan butang dito nga mao ni nga time na patay ang iyang relatives para immediately dayon ma-approve ng judge. So this is view of Muslim customs and traditions, providing among others burying the dead within 24 hours after death. So the warden shall timely oppose the request and timely notify the court of his or her inability to comply with the order allowing the inmate to be escorted out of the jail to view the remains of a deceased relative in any of the following cases. So, dili pwede sugtan ni warden nga ihatag nimo ang request nimo sa court nga mo view ka sa imuhang deceased relative kung ang deceased relative nimo is naas dyan nakahaya o di kaya naas dyan ilubong sa lugar nga beyond 30 kilometer radius from the jail or in any case where the inmate cannot return to said place during daylight hours. So for example, kung mauni ang deceased relative nimo where he is lying in state, and then mauni ang mauni ang jail, kinahanglan within 30 kilometer radius rang inyong pagitan. Kung beyond gani na, for example, kung naadiri ang place where you need to view, kung beyond gani na, dili na pwede. So kinahanglan within 30 kilometer radius ra. And dapat ko makabalik ra ka during daytime. The inmate has a record of escape or attempted escape. So dili gajud ka bawalan gajud ka nga mag-visit dito sa imong deceased relative kung naa na kay record nga ni escape di ay ka or ni attempt kapag iskapo. The inmate has 2 or more pending criminal cases or is a material witness in a pending criminal case. So kung naa na kay 2 or more pending criminal case na naguyat sa imo, di po ka pwede pagawsan. O di kaya material witness ka, very important kasi ka nga witness sa isa ka pending criminal case. Kaya ba sige initan ka, gipangita ka, ninpatyon kapag makita ka. The inmate is classified as a high risk, high profile, high value, or violent extremist offender. The inmate cannot be assured of his safety and security or his escape is highly possible. So dili ka masaligan kay sure gajud sila, sure ang warden nga kung mo escape ka ay mo gawas ka, tugutan ka nga mo gawas with escort, na gajud possibility nga maka-escape gajud ka. And then there is an intelligence report that the inmate will escape or will be rescued. Labi na ko no, bawal gajud kapag gawson kung naa sila'y nadawat nga information nga uy kani si Juan patay ra ba ni iyang relative, na arabay balita nga mugawas ni siya or kuhaon siya. So ingana. If approved naman, the inmate shall not be allowed to stay more than 3 hours in the place where the remains of the deceased relative lie in state. Further, in no case shall the inmate be allowed to join the funeral cortege. So, pwede ra ka moadto sa haya, dili ka pwede moadto sa lubong. So, kinahanglan kung mugawas ka dito, dapat dili ka magstay ng more than 3 hours. So, below 3 hours, kinahanglan mo balik na dyan ka sa jail or sa facility. Next is cooperation and coordination among jail wardens regarding temporary transfer of inmate. So jail wardens must agree on the use of facilities for the temporary detention of an inmate from other localities before, during, and after trial. Warden who shall affect the movements or transfers of an inmate shall shoulder all the expenses for transportation and other incidental expenses of the same while confined in another jail. The classification standards of the BJMP, such as the inmate's age, gender, or those with special needs, among others, shall be observed while he or she is in temporary detention. So, many ang rules to be followed when transporting an inmate. So, when transporting inmates, the following shall be observed. So, di ba ako ning gipabasa sa inyo, kay ako ning gipa-oral sa inyo. Number 1, jail personnel shall not discuss with the inmate the transportation plans, schedules, and equipment to be used or adopted. So, prior kuno to the transfer of the inmate, kinahanglan di gajud makabati ang inmate ng mga plano ninyo as to asa mo moagi, unsa nga vehicle ang sakyan, kinsay mga iban, kinsay mga kinsay escort personnel nga kauban sa inmate in transferring him or her. Kay basi makabayo siya mo tawag siya dito sa ijang mga sindikato nga oy ing ani nga oras mo kuan mo transfer, ing ani nga oras ko i-transfer i-add to sa asa nga facility. So please at ngira kanin ninyo nga vehicle. So dili na pwede. Mao na gina-avoid ng mga personnel. Inmates shall be notified of a trip only prior to the departure and shall not be allowed to make any phone call. So, ma-notify ra ang inmate nga mugawas na siya karon na nga oras. So, kung karon siya i-transfer, karon na sad siya makahibayo. And then, dili siya pwede mo tawag sa kung kinsa man. Mayroon siya, ay, pwede makitawag anay ko, dili na pwede. Prior to movement or transport, all escort personnel shall be given detailed instructions on their respective duties and responsibilities. So, of course, kung i-transfer gajud ang isa ka inmate, ang ato ang mga escort personnel, dapat kabayo sila sa ilahang trabaho. So, dili man po na nato sila i-accept as escort personnel if they are not competent with their job. So, whenever possible, transfer shall only be made during daytime. Kung possible ko no, kinahanglan raw na daytime ra gajud i-transfer si inmate. Long distance transport of one or more inmates shall be escorted by a minimum of 3 escort personnel and a backup vehicle if available. So, kung ladyo ang transportan, for example, diri Surigao, pasingod sa Davao, kaya naman dito ay Davao Penal Colony. Kinahanglan ko no, ang escort ko no is dapat minimum pinakagamay ra ng tulo gajud ka escort na personnel, and dapat na sila ay backup nga vehicle, so na convoy or unsarakan if available. If possible, personnel from jail intelligence unit shall serve covert security by serving as advance party of the convoy and shall conduct road scanning of the agreed route to detect any threat to the inmate and his or her escorts while en route. So, being familiar with the area, the local intelligence unit of the nearest jail facility in the place of destination shall also assist in long-distance transport of inmates by way of conducting reconnaissance operation prior to the scheduled arrival or to determine any unusual activities in the area which may affect the safe and secure transportation of the inmate. So, pwede ko nung anay mag-una dito nga intelligence unit para ma-secure gajud ko nung nga wayay harang, wayay possible nga mag-atang sa ila dito nga syndicates nga possible nga maimukuha sa inmate to make the inmate escape. The most direct and shortest route to the destination shall be taken and no deviation shall be allowed except when security considerations requires otherwise. So ang pinaka-short raga jud ko nung agihanan maoy ilahang agihan, dili ko no pwede gadyo dito sa pinakataas nga road kay of course kung naapay short kung naay pinaka basta na easy nga paraan nga ma-transfer da yung inmate dito maggadyo na nila agi. Dili pod kuno pwede nga maoy nakasabutan ang kadto nga agihanan and then mo deviate ka kanang mukuan ka ba mulis kag agi ang madugay na hinaon ka. Team leader of the escort using rented vehicle shall not be allowed when transporting inmates. So, kinhanglan ang vehicle ra gajud sa BJMP mao'y gamiton. Ang vehicle dito nga facility ra mao'y gamiton. Dili pwede mag-rent a car. Grabe ka fancy ba dyan ng inmate kung mag-rent a car. Kaya base isad nga naa dito yung mga bomba or unora kang tracking device nga gipang pikit dito sa vehicle. So, it is important to use the specific vehicle for the transport of inmates. Team leader of the escort personnel must be equipped with a two-way radio and a mobile phone. Inmates under escort shall always be under the watchful eye of the escort personnel while in transit, so the personnel shall stay close enough to the inmate to be able to respond effectively in case of emergency. If on board a prisoner's van, escort personnel shall not sit inside the van, but shall instead strategically position himself or herself in the escort seat. So, ang inmates ko no under escort, dapat ko no tanawan kasi sila ng escort. So, while in transit, kinahanglan ang personnel, dili sila magduol-duol dito sa inmate. Para kung unsa man gani mahitabo sa inmates and his or her kaiban didto maka-respond dyan sila immediately. So if na sila sa prisoner's van, kinahanglan dili sila mo tapad directly with the inmate, kinahanglan magpalajo sila or dito sila sa escort seat. While en route, escort personnel shall ensure that the sliding bolt lock of the back door of the van carrying the inmates is properly locked. Observe people and vehicles getting near their vehicle and remain prepared for any eventuality. Kinahanglan ma-secure ni mo nga lock gajud ang back door kay base dito ra mulipot dito sa likod. And then kung kinsa may medyo makatapad nga vehicle or na may tawo nga moduol sa ijo vehicle, dapat kabayop ka. Dili ka magpatanga-tanga if you are the personnel. Escort personnel shall observe and follow the established guidelines in escorting high-risk or high-profile and VAOs inmate. So, escort personnel shall be the first ones to disembark from the vehicle and shall position in a safe distance to ensure clear vision of disembarking inmates. However, when boarding the vehicle, it should be the inmate who shall first board the vehicle. So, kung pagsuyod sa inmate, pag manuyod na sila sa van or sa vehicle, kinahanglan mag-una ang inmate. So, kung mugawas na po sila or manaog na sila, kinahanglan mag-una ang escort personnel. Escort personnel are justified in using deadly force to protect themselves and or the inmates from ambush or any deadly attack while in transport. So, ang ingon gani no sa SOP nga, it's better kuno nga ikaw makauna kaysa ikaw kuno ang unhan. So, okay ra daw nga mag-use ng deadly force kung kani nga circumstance is para nimo protektahan imong kaugalingon from the ambush or the inmate or any other attack or incident nga kinahanglan ang deadly force. In case of an accident while en route, escort personnel shall secure and observe the inmates inside the vehicle. Let them stay inside the vehicle as much as possible. Apply first aid to injured inmates when necessary while waiting for the law enforcement and emergency assistance. So the chief escort shall also be informed about the incident and be updated of the development of the situation. So kinahanglan kung naman gani ang aksidente, imo kadto i-secure anay ang inmate, ang kaligtasan ng inmate while naghuyat ka sa emergency response. Dili pwede nga imo siyang bidyaan didto tungod kay nasakitan ka or di kaya grabe nimo ka injured, di pwede nga imo siyang bidyaan dito or ang inmate is grabe ka injured, imo rang pasagdan di nimo hatagan ng first aid. In the event that radio or mobile communication is not possible, escort personnel may flag down any motorist, identify themselves, and ask the motorist to notify the nearest law enforcement agency for assistance. So, kung naman gani emergency or accident ka mahitabo wherein wayay cellphone or wayay communication device ang personnel para mo contact dito sa base or dito sa BJMP facility or any law enforcement agencies, pwede ra nga mangpara siya dito ng tao, motorista o rakan para mo contact dito sa law enforcers. In the case of minor serious vehicular problem that can be repaired on the spot, escort personnel shall secure and observe inmates who shall remain inside the vehicle to the extent possible. So for example, kung ang vehicle manggani is maguba sa kalagitnaan ng transportation, it is important na ang mga inmates naara sila sa ilayom sa vehicle. Dili sila mugawas. Kinahanglan ang personnel ra ang magtrabaho sa kung unsa manggani ang guba sa vehicle. Di pwede nga panaugon nimo ang inmate tungod kay katong inmate mekaniko to. So kabayos dya. So dili na pwede. Maximum security measures shall be observed at all times in providing escort to high-risk, high-profile inmates and VEOs in following the ratio of 1:1 plus 1 escort supervisor. So, for example kung ang atong i-transfer nga inmate is naaani nga category, kaning high-risk, high-profile inmate and VEO, kinahanglan ang atong ratio is isa ka inmate is to isa pod ka personnel plus isa ka supervisor. Nasabdan? So for example, kung tulo na sila ka inmate, kinahanglan tulo pod kuno ka personnel ang mag-escort sa ila plus isa ka supervisor. So I hope nasabdan na. The driver shall not leave the vehicle while in court or other authorized destination and be watchful of any suspicious individual. So, kinahanglan di ka mugawas outside the vehicle if you are the personnel. To avoid unnecessary stops while in transit, inmates should have relieved themselves from personal necessity. So, kinahanglan mangihi na kung kisay kailangan mangihi, malibang na kung kisay malibang while para ma-avoid nato nga maupa mag-take ng necessity ang inmate while in transportation na. So, the following basic security precautions shall be observed during the transport of inmates. So, kinahanglan ni nato silang i-observe. Do not allow inmates to tinker with the handcuff. Dili nimo siya i-allow nga magduwa-duwa sa handcuff. Awid-awirang ang handcuff niya o di kaya sa ihang tapad nga inmate. Kay basi, mauna na ang kuan, pamaagi niya para maka-escape nga imo sa siyang pansinon nga na kay kung duulo nimo sun bagon pala man ka or sarakan kinahanglan imo na dadyan si jang ipa-stop and then base na siya gihawiran dito nga mga devices nga gitusok-tusok niya dito sa kuan para mayabihan ang iyang handcuff. Regard all inmates being transported as extremely dangerous. So kanang atong mga inmates bisan pa og minimum security na sila kung i-transport na kinahanglan we will treat them as extremely dangerous. Kay although they are considered as that category pero still they are inmates. So importante na. Adjust the cuffs properly for tightness to avoid the need of adjustment while en route and observe proper placement and handcuff which is either right to right or left to left. High-risk or high-profile inmates and VOs must be handcuffed at the back. Kinahanglan kasi kuno sa likod sila handcuff kung high-risk or high-profile sila. So, kinahanglan properly tight sila karadyaw kay para ma-observe na nato ang pag-adjust while en route. Kay base ila nang i-take for granted ang imong adjustment sa ila to attack you. The escort shall always be on guard for any possible attack or ambush. Escort personnel shall be extra careful not to sit, stand, or walk next to the inmate while carrying a gun to avoid being grabbed by the inmate. Dili ka magpaso-paso dito sa bus or sa van nga naa kay daya nga firearm kay basig they will immediately grab the firearm and then tutok na sa imo or they will attack you. Stopping along the highway while in transit is highly discouraged. Keep inmates inside the vehicle except when necessary. So, thoroughly inspect restraint equipment for proper function and damage and make a thorough body search before placing the equipment on an inmate and before removing an inmate from a holding area. Keep inmates in sight at all times. Kinahanglan makita nimo permi. While in court premises, firearms shall be unloaded. However, when escorting the inmate to and from the vehicle, the same shall be properly loaded with ammunitions. Exercise good judgment as unexpected events not covered by policy or procedure may occur in any transport. So if in doubt, secure the inmate in a local law enforcement or jail facility and call the chief escort or officer of the day for direction. Never stop for a disabled motorist. Dili ka jud ka mo stop kung naay nasiraan dira nga motorista or road mishap while transporting inmates, but notify local enforcement unit or the highway patrol regarding the incident. Okay, it is not your job to stop and to help the motorist or the person who needs a help, but it is the job of the police officers or kinsarakan nga mga officers. Avoid interfering with road incidences such as but not limited to robbery in progress while transporting inmates unless it possesses imminent threat against the inmate. Escort personnel or the public, and if the same so occurs, the immediate evacuation of the inmate from the area shall be primarily considered. In no case shall the inmate and the vehicle be left unattended. Di ka jud pwede nga wayay naglantaw sa vehicle, wayay inside the vehicle. So, you need to avoid kung unsa man nga incident or emergency nga imong masugatan sa jail while transporting the inmate. In case of involvement in a road accident and no traffic authority is present or cannot arrive in a shortest possible time, the position of the vehicles and the damage incurred, including skid marks, if any, shall be immediately photographed or sketched, and before leaving, provide the driver of the other party a contact number of the jail. Once the inmate was returned to the jail, immediately coordinate with the traffic authorities having jurisdiction in the place of incident. So, for example, kung nagbangga ang escorting vehicle and a normal vehicle, it is important ko nga picturean da dyan nimo or sketch da dyan nimo ang katong mga skid marks nga imong na-acquire dito sa vehicle nga nakabangga sa escorting vehicle. Transporting vehicle, I mean. Secure inmates who damage restraints and equipment or vehicles and report rule infraction. So, kung mahibaw-an nimo nga na ay inmate dira nga giguba ang ihang handcuff, rule infraction na dadya na siya. Kailangan animang i-report. Turn in vehicle inspection slip to the supply officer noting any vehicle deficiency or problem upon conclusion of each transport. So, kailangan na kay i-notify mo sila nga kaninay sira ang ating transporting vehicle. So, waya ni siya na check ganina. Turn in or check in all inmates property or equipment and the necessary documents to the concerned offices. So, here are the rules of the chief escort. So, kaning si chief escort, siya ang mag-coordinate with the record section chief and determines the number and names of inmates scheduled for court hearing as well as their respective destinations as approved by the warden. Suggested ang mag-conduct ng guard mounting and accounting of the members of escort. Coordinate with the custodial unit of the list of inmate nga scheduled for court hearing and assume responsibility over them. Next is records in the jail blotter, the purpose, date, time, branch of court, and other designation of each movement, transport of inmates. Please read na lang sa ilahang functions. Select escort personnel and designate a team leader. Kinahanglan na kay team leader. Accomplish the daily escort slip indicating the names of assigned escort. Ensure the availability of marked transportation vehicle. Supervise the conduct of strip searches on inmates before pa sila i-transport. Ensure ko nimo nga appropriate ang mga security measures in the custody and control of inmates nga i-transport. And then ensure that inmates are properly dressed in accordance with prescription. Next is he or she will ensure the driver had checked the vehicle and a certain blow baguettes is observed. So, ang kaning blow baguettes mo ni ang important notices, important things na kinahanglan gi-inspection beforehand or before i-transport ang isa ka inmate. So, I know you already know the meaning of blow baguettes kaya ako man gipa-memorize sa inyo for your oral. And it will also be present in your examination, in final examination. Monitors through handheld radio or mobile phone the situation and current location of the inmates and their escorts while outside the jail facility. In case of long-distance transport of inmates, coordinates with the nearest local law enforcement agencies or units having territorial jurisdiction over the destination and maintain regular communication with the warden on all movements or transfers of the inmates. So, manay trabaho ni chief escort. Next is ang trabaho ni escort personnel. So, kung ang escort personnel nato, they will check the identity and receive the inmate named in the daily escort slip duly signed by the escort chief. So, i-maintain po nila ang copy of current profiles and photos of all inmates na ilang gina-transfer in case of emergency. Ensure the correct identification ng all inmates being transported by comparing the face, name, and other important data with the photograph and information on each inmate's profile before leaving the facility. Kailangan i-ensure gud nila nga kana nga inmate is the same inmate who is in order by the court to be transported. Conduct visual inspection of the vehicle. Ensure that all inmates are properly restrained before going out of jail. Ascertain ko no nga ang inmate has crippled, deformed, or very small hand will allow him or her to slip the handcuff of his hand. Be armed with an authorized and duly permitted weapon and ammunitions. Transport and secure the inmate as assigned. So sila ang na ay main responsibility to transport and secure the inmate nga gi-assign sa ila. So sila I think ang na ay pinakalisod nga responsibility in transferring the inmate kay sila man immediately first hand ang maka-experience nga i-transport ang inmate. Then maintain radio or mobile phone contact with the chief escort officer of the day in the jail. Be updated of their location along the roadways to expedite response from law enforcement units in case of any eventuality. So, dirita sa use of restraints. In all instances, an inmate being moved shall be handcuffed. Kinahanglan ko no, while transporting the inmate, kinahanglan naka-handcuff siya permi. So, kung kadto ganing high profile, high risk, BEO, kinahanglan sa likod handcuff. When 2 or more inmates are transported, kung 2 or more ko no ang i-transport nga inmate, each must be secured to the other. Kinahanglan, not only nakagapo sila o nakahandcuff sila, but also dapat nakahandcuff pud sila sa each other. In no case shall an inmate be handcuffed in any part of the vehicle. Dili pwede nga si inmate ko no imong i-handcuff dito, itali nimo dito sa bintana, sa ingkuranan, sa unsarakan nga part ng vehicle. Di pareha nang sa mga salida. So during transit ko no, to avoid being trapped in case of an accident. So basi na aksidente, and then kung imo silang itali sa vehicle, di na noon sila save sa ilang kaugalingon. Use additional restraints or limited restraints for special needs when necessary shall be authorized. So mao ni ang techniques nato in handcuffing. I hope na you were informed or kabayo na mo ani of knowledge sa technique ninyo of in handcuffing. Kay naani sa atong CDI 1, 2, and 3 or sa unsarakan. Naapo ni sa atong DefTac. So mao ni ang atong himuon sa rear position, sa likod, and the front position. Guidelines for using restraint. So mao ni ang guidelines for using restraints. Kanas ara nato gamiton ang restraint. And unsaon nato siya paggamit. Never place a restrained inmate in an area where unrestrained inmates are located. Dili pwede nga ang katong inmate nga imong gi-handcuff is imong itibo dito sa inmate nga wayay handcuff, kay basig tabangan siya dito, di kaya tabangan pud siya pagkuha sa iyahang posas. Never handcuff ko an inmate without double locking both handcuffs. Basi isa ra ang imong handcuff, ang isa ka handcuff waya, it's still loose. So kailangan nimo i-check ang duha. Never handcuff a male inmate with a female inmate. So dili gyud na pwede no nga magtapad ang atong female and male inmates. Always separate na sila kung possible. Ang separate vehicle ginahimo na, dili na pwede nga mag-iban si male and female inmate kay basig mag-kiss na silang duha. Never handcuff an adult inmate with a juvenile inmate. Kani mo grabe ka bawal. Kay ang bata, as much as possible, di nato sila i-handcuff. So kung makaya pa nga dili i-handcuff ang bata, dili na siya i-handcuff, or kung i-handcuff magani siya, dili ipakita. So importante nga dili magadi na sila mag-uban kay i-separate man na sila. In any cases nga ang bata is nakahimo ng serious or grave offense, maski pa unsa ka grave ang iyang gihimo, still dili na siya ginaalaw sa balaod nga iuban ang inmate o ang juvenile, an adult inmate and a juvenile. Never handcuff a maximum risk inmate with a medium or minimum risk inmate. Dili na pwede. And observe right to right or left to left when placing handcuffs. And restraint shall never be used as punishment. This is very important. Na dili pwede lang unimang inmate nga, uy, nakasaya ka, kinahanglan nimo pusasan. Uy, gabi man nimo kakuan. Nakasaya man kay ani. Dili pwede nga imo siyang pusasan para imo siyang himuon nga punishment para sa inmate. Kay ang restraint, it is only used to neutralize them when they are very violent, o di kaya kung grabe nila ka or di kaya kung they are actually inmates, kay they are considered as dangerous. Special concerns, diri na ta sa illness en route, kung naay sakit. In the event that an inmate becomes gravely ill while en route and there is no medical assistance available, the escort personnel shall make an arrangement for a medical examination at the nearest government hospital or medical facility. So kani sila actually should di naman kinahanglan pa nga ato pang isa-isa pag-discuss. Kaso kay kamo lagi di man mo makasabot pagdali nang some of these are in need for discussion. So I hope nga you will learn to read by yourself, since naaman mo yung mga libro, dili man mo mga kuan illiterate nga di mo kabasa o di mo makasabot. Kay ang naa sa libro is grabe ra ka easily to understand. Sa dyon ra siya karadyaw sabton. Kung waya mo kasabot sa English, pwede na ninyo i-search sa dictionary. Anyway, some of these are ahong gipang discuss is because importante ni si kay kani ang naa sa board exam, like hatagan kag situation when it comes to the transfer of the inmate, hatagan ka kung unsa may imong himuon kung isa ka escort personnel. So kinahanglan nga kahibayo ka ani nila, kay kung kamo ray ang pasagdan, ay no nga waya mo nang gibasa ani, mo take ra mo ng exam and then waya ra inyong gibasa. So it's important na at least man lamang na mati ka mo sa discussion, kay kung namamati mo, sometimes ma-inculcate man na sa inyong mind, ma-remember na ni Diyos siya. So maski pawaya mo nagbasa, nakabayo mo tungod kay namati mo, kana kung namati gajud mo pag tarong. So the escort personnel shall contact the chief escort or officer of the day for further instruction, and should an escort personnel becomes ill during transport, the escort shall secure the inmates in a nearest jail, police station, and immediate notify the chief escort or officer of the day. So number 2 is escape, kung makatakas ang inmate. If an inmate escapes during transport, the escort personnel shall exhaust all means possible to immediately apprehend the inmate. Kinahanglan tanan pamaagi ways para madakpan nimo ang personnel while in transport. Kinahanglan na nimo nga himuon. Kung di na nimo himuon, ay good luck sa imo. If more than one inmate is being transported, at least one personnel shall remain with the inmates still in custody. Kung more than one ang inmate, and then isa nakaikyas, kinahanglan na ay magtanaw gihapon sa mga remaining inmates nga naara sa ilayom. Dili pwede nga bidyaan sila, and then focus ka dito sa ni escape, kay base day tulo sila kabuok, and then ang isa ray ni escape, ang isa ka inmate kamo duha sa imong kauban ni adto didto nangita sa ija, and then waya na nabilin sa vehicle, then ang duha ka inmate nga nabilin imbes dagan sila nanuoy ni escape. Nadakpan nimo ang isa pero still nakaikyas ang duha. The escort personnel shall notify the nearest law enforcement unit and the chief escort as soon as possible. I-notify gajud ang law enforcement unit, ang police, ang chief escort nga oy nakatakas ni si Juan ingani kay aron maka-dispatch dyan sila ng ilahang mga personnel. Personnel shall remain in the vicinity of the place where escape happened to assist local law enforcement units, and in the event that an escape or attempted escape has transpired in a public place, kung public place dyan escape, escort personnel shall not fire warning shots. In no cases gajud nga mo fire ng warning shot ang isa ka jail personnel, kay bawal na siya sa balaod, labi na kay naa sa public. If time and opportunity allows and no other person is near the escapee, the personnel may shoot, provided a verbal warning was made prior in the discharge of the firearm. So lang unimo ang inmate nga ay nakapusilon i-ensure gajud nimo nga way mga tao sa paligid nga possible nga maigo sa imuhang pagpusil sa inmate. Next is meals. Escort personnel shall provide all meals and drinks en route with the packed meals and drinks. So inmate meals shall be served to the inmate in the transport vehicle, and the inmate shall be kept in restraint at all times. So bisan pag nagkaon sila, still naka-handcuff gihapon. When it comes to restroom breaks, kung mangihi or malibang, if possible, escort personnel shall coordinate restroom breaks with the nearest local law enforcement units or jail facilities. Kung maingon si inmate nga, ay kahiyon ko. So si escort personnel malaong na, ay ato sa police station, dito ra ka mangihi. In case of emergency stop, escort personnel should avoid congested areas. Dili pwede nga dito mo stop sa kanang traffic or place nga daghay tawo. Escort personnel must inspect emergency stop areas before entry and keep the inmate under visual supervision at all times without removing the restraint. Contact to the public. Escort personnel shall maintain low profile and shall avoid public contact while in the company of an inmate. Inmates shall not be allowed to make any phone call or contact with anyone while in transport. Dili pwede nga babuslon sila ng cellphone or allow sila nga mag-chat or matawag sa kung kinsa ra kaan kay base mo na ilang reason na hinuha nga maka-escape sila tungod kay naay mag-atang sa vehicle. An authorized person shall not be allowed to get near the inmate. Only a lawyer or lawyers and court personnel shall be permitted to converse with the inmate. And no immediate interview shall be allowed for the inmate and or escort personnel. Of course, wayay media nga kinahanglan natong ay allowed to interview the inmate nga i-transfer. Emergency plans or contingency plans. So, diri na ta sa mga incidents or accidents that will happen inside the jail. So, of course, dili man nato malikayan nga naa gyud mga calamity nga mahitabo inside the jail. So, natay natural calamities. It means natural ra ni nga moabot, waya ni nato gi-predict. Sometimes ma-predict ni nato, pero mostly dili. Man-made calamities or disturbances. So, kanining mga incident nga ang tawo ra mismo mo ay naghimo aron mahitabo ni siya. So, sa natural calamity, grabe no katong nag-oral ta. Iya man lamang mo naka-answer kung sa natural calamity. Kung sa man-made calamity nga pwede mahitabo inside the jail. So, number 1, we have fire, flood, kanaang sana baha, earthquake, linog, tsunami, landslide, typhoon, volcanic eruption, epidemics, pare atong COVID-19 and others. And sa man-made calamities or disturbances naman, pwede sila mag-riot inside the jail, jailbreak, noise barrage, hostage taking, food poisoning, rescue, biological attacks, bombing, water shortage, power failure, and others. So, wala ito mga emergencies. Regular dry run. To ensure that the contingency plans would be applied to the letters, regular dry run shall be conducted, taking into personnel on off duty upon notice of disturbances. Regional and provincial offices of the Jail Bureau shall adopt its own contingency plans on how to react upon the notices of any disturbance in the jail and in its own offices. The same kind, likewise, conduct a regular dry run to ensure effective and well-organized reaction. So, mag-dry run ganit ta diri sa outside, na ganit tay mga drills, earthquake drills, labi na dito inside the jail tungod kay daghan man sila dito. And then congested man dito. So, kinahanglan na sila ginahimo nga contingency plan nga dry run nga in case ingani ang mahitabo asa man ang mga inmate mosingod. So, sa board exam na mo no, ang sa amo gipangutana dito kung unsa man kunoy imong himuon kung nahi earthquake. Then gibutang dito ang mga choices. Imo ba kuno sidyang dayon sa covered court? Pasagdan ra ba kuno nimo sidya? Motawag ba kuno ka og emergency kuan? Sana agencies or unsa tong isa ka choice. So lisod to siya, kailangan you will pick the best choice gajud if possible. Manang importante nga basahon ni sila. So duties and responsibilities of BJMP personnel in the frontline service. So the following are the specific duties and responsibilities of personnel assigned in a particular jail. So, si jail warden generally exercises supervision and control over all personnel in the jail unit and inmates in all matters related to the following. Ang proper implementation ng mga orders in the jail, administration of sanctions and their disciplinary actions on kaning ilahang mga violation, conduct greyhound operations and inspections of jail facilities and premises. So, natay surprise inspection. Greyhound kanang halughugon gajud ang cell ng isa ka inmate. And then we have looks after the welfare of his or her men, through awards, commendations, and the like. And then leads and enforces a high standard of discipline among his personnel, endeavors to promote yung personal and professional growth of subordinates, observe fairness and impartiality in dealing with personnel and inmates, and always uphold human rights and observes the code of the conduct. So, mana. Then assumes responsibility for the formulation of implementation of emergency plans. Delegate work activities to his subordinates. Ensure proper use and maintenance of equipment. Coordinate with GOs and NGOs. Act or the media groups. Act on the matters of as his PA or the RD may direct. Submit spot reports if necessary to higher offices. Turn over duties and responsibilities. Perform such other functions as higher offices may direct. And then we have the assistant warden. So, of course, si Jang mo-assume sa duty and responsibility ni jail warden kung waya ang jail warden. Then, will assist the jail warden in the implementation of plans, assist the jail warden in supervision and monitoring of programs and projects, assess the jail warden or overall management of the jail unit, and acts as chairman ko, no? Diba? Si Jang chairman of the inmates disciplinary machinery and katong classification board. So, di na ninyo kalimtan. Then, kani sila, pwede na ninyong basahon. So, let's move on to the custodial unit. Then, we have the custodial procedures. So, di ba na ato sa atong oral recitation ang custodial function kung kasi nakahubot adto. Custodial function is a highly sensitive and delicate job that requires personal specialization, prowess, and keen knowledge of the job and of the hazards involved. It also requires personal mental stability and physical attributes needed to perform at optimum level. Incidents of escapes due to custodial lapses, however, cannot be attributed solely to the absence of the factors mentioned earlier. This may boil down to laxity, lack of self-discipline, and lack of dedication to sworn to job on the part of the personnel concerned. So, if you are one of the custodial personnel or apil ka ng custodial unit na akay custodial function, it means you are specialized na kay keen knowledge in containing, in neutralizing all the incidents, accidents inside the jail. You have the responsibility na to take or to give the proper custodial discipline to the inmates nga kinahanglan ma-secure nimo sila because they are serving their sentence or di kaya for safekeeping. So if you have the custodial unit, you're in the custodial unit, you have the custodial function. So very sensitive siya. It's tungod kay naaman sa imo rely ang kana bitang mga situation nga mag-end up into jailbreak, into unsa ra kan nga mga incident sa inside the jail. So if ang kani atong mga custodial officers, sila ang responsible nga i-contain and neutralize ang nahitabo nga mga incident inside the jail. It is a must that both dedication to the job and discipline be inculcated in the hearts and minds of the personnel. So this can be done through regular meeting, PI&E, and other ways to remind personnel the essence of being a jail officers, the nature of the job they have chosen, the things expected of them. Custodial functions, therefore, is not merely seeing to it that the personnel are physically present or existent. More importantly, it refers to the personnel's conscious effort to ensure the prevention of any untoward incidents that would tarnish the image of the jail bureau and or the prevention of destruction to the lives and properties. So, kung custodial officer, nag-rely ang responsibility nga kailangan niya i-secure, kailangan i-prevent niya ang all instances or accidents that will happen inside the jail. So, mo na ang custodial function. Custodial function is never easy. It involves an intrinsically great responsibility such as but not limited to kanang strict adherence to rules. Kinahanglan mapasunod nimo imong mga tawo, labi na ang mga inmates inside the jail. Regulations, SOPs, kinahanglan, and memoranda, and etc. So, kanang atong mga personnel nga naa sa custodial unit, kinahanglan, they know the rules and the SOPs and memorandas inside the jail so that they will operate effective ang ilang pag-operate inside the jail by all concerned. However, it can be made a hobby, notwithstanding the temptations, hardships, and dangers entwined with it. The foregoing considered, a warden is required to be present on a 24/7 basis to supervise personnel and direct the operations of his or her jail unit. Chaos, untoward incidents, and unsound subordinates decisions often result from the absence of an officer, particularly during emergencies. So, sa kuno mo na ay mga kagubot inside the jail, it's because wala may supervision ang isa ka jail warden. So, kinahanglan mag-supervise ang jail warden within 24/7 gadget ko, no? Okay, para ma-prevent nila ang any disturbances inside the jail. So, mano yung atong mga rules and SOPs. Generally, all personnel should be equipped and clothed with BJMP core values. Custodial personnel shall render the morning pangutana dito sa oral recitation, maximum of 8 hours of operational tour of duty daily. So, kada adlaw, 8 hours ang ilahang duty. Unless, kung necessary nga, kinhanglan ka dyan nila kailangan dyan nila mo duty beyond 8 hours. No personnel shall render less than 50 hours of official tour of duty weekly. No personnel shall be allowed 1 day duty with 2 days off, or 2 day duty with 3 day off, or weekly straight duty, especially in far-flung jail units. So, di ba bawal po itong successive nga pag duty sa isa ka inmate. So, kinahanglan kung ikaw karon imo ning shift, the next shift should not be you. So, kinahanglan imo na ng kauban, and then pwede na sa next shift ikaw na. No personnel shall be permitted, allowed, or authorized by the warden to act as his personal bodyguard or as an intel officer without approval by higher headquarters. Incoming duty, custodial shall be present 30 minutes before the turnover to pave the way for guard mounting activity. No personnel shall leave his or her post unless properly relieved. All outgoing personnel shall wait for his or her reliever. Kinahanglan gajud maguyat ani sa reliever nimo, adi sir ka mo gawas or mo relieve from your duty. Before the accounting of inmates, greyhound should be conducted if necessary. So, kinahanglan na day inspection sa cell kung necessary ra sad sidya before mag-count off ang mga inmates. So, ang facility check shall be religiously done. Dili pwede nga basta-basta na lamang i-check. Kinahanglan halughog kung halughog. During the accounting of inmates, both incoming and outgoing shift supervisors and all members of the incoming custodial personnel shall personally account the inmates. So, accounting of inmates should be done at least 6 times a day. Diba 5 to 6 times to sidya. The personnel shall carry his gun while in the designated no firearm zone. No personnel shall enter the jail building unless accompanied by his body. Diba? Nagit dapat body. It is a must for incoming desk officer to check previous entries in the logbook. Personnel manning designated post shall stay his or her post for the most of their 8-hour tour of duty. Personnel shall be vigilant at all times. No personnel take a nap or sleep while his or her post, especially during third shifts, duties, or during unholy hours. So, shift supervisor shall conduct hourly inspection. He shall likewise ensure that no personnel are using cell phone, tablet, iPads, any gadget that can disrupt the attention while on tour of duty. Personnel assigned in the main gate of the facility shall be professionally strict and firm, keen observer of the surrounding, and shall open the gate only when safety is assured. So, kinahanglan po na. Kani. Practice of and adhere to jail officers' common sense and of plan greyhound are musts all the among jail officers. Never trust inmate. Zero escape is everybody's business. So, dili ka dyan pwede nga salig ka sa inmate. Kaya although buutan na na, bisagi pa magka-amigo mo, dili ka mag trust sa iya. Tungod kay inmate maghihapon na sa dyan. So, mga ni ang mga duties of the officers. So, it is important nga inyo na lang yung basahon. Anyway, di na ko karadyo diri mga nguha ng di na ko karadyo diri manguha ng topic for the exam. Kay ilahan naman yung individual functions. You need to still read this kay basi naa diri ang ahang pangkwaon. Although gamay ra pero matungnan nga waya ka nagbasa, so di gapon ka ka-answer. So diri ta sa searches procedures. To attain 100% effectiveness of every search, it demands dedication, cunning, wit, and firmness of every searcher. Searchers should possess qualities and characteristics that are unbendable by temptations, threats, or pressure, demands, and intimidations by inmates, visitors, or colleagues in the uniform service. Okay, kinahanglan ang ato ang mga personnel nga mag-conduct ng search inside the cell of the inmate. Kinahanglan sila nga firm, with integrity, kanang dili basta-basta nga mailad-ilad sa inmate. Dapat they should be intimidating kay aron mamati ang mga inmate. Searchers comprise the first line of defense to thwart the entry of all contrabands, and the last line of defense when communications aimed to besmirch or embarrass the jail bureau come from inside the jail. So, dili pwede nga ato ang mga personnel nga nag-conduct ng inspection is iletra nila nga na mga contraband ka suyod. So, dili na siya pwede. Although, sa ato ang mga jails diri lagi, dili naman na to kasaligan ang kaning atong mga SOP, kaning manual, tungod kay as what we see in the reality, this is not actually what happens inside the jail. Tungod kay daghan ka dyan contraband inside the jail. So, kanira is the important things that we need to know nga mao dapat ang himuon ng atong facilities. So, maani ang functions ng searchers. Searcher must aim for zero contraband slipping through him or her or smuggling into the jail facility during his or her search. Must be professional, exercising prudence and sound judgment, respecting the rights of the visitors or personnel whom he or she subject to search. Strict and firm dapat siya sa ihang mga decisions. Must be impartial. So, dili tratuhon nato tanan ang visitors as equal. Dili tungod kay mayor ang mo-visit, nanatay nanadadyan tay biases. Observe courtesy to all visitors. And the such. So, these kinahanglan ninyong pangpasahon. So, masabda naman ni silang tanan. So, di naman kinahanglan nga isa-isa kon pa ni nato kay maabdan ta ani og 1 million years. Charat. So, maana. So, katong akong mga gipang discuss in this video, mostly dito ra ko magkuha ng atong exam. So, kani sila, although kinahanglan ni natong basahon, but gamay ra diri nga percent ang akong kuhaon nga scope. So, kani sila is the, groups in handling the emergencies or accidents inside the jail. So, dito ra lamang tataman sa ato ang discussion. I think kani sila masabtan naman mo sila tanan. But anyway, as what I've said, katong akong ipang discuss, dito ra ko mostly magkuha ng question for your final exam. So, ang inyong exam will consist of 25% from your previous term, your pre-final, prelim, midterm, and pre-final, and then 75% from the final chapter. So, for the final coverage. Ang inyong coverage sa inyong final exam will be the chapter 4 of your book, and then 25% sa kadtong atong gipang previously discussed in prelim to pre-final. So I hope na naamoy nasabdan sa atong gipang discuss, and you will not I hope namin na sabtan sa atong gipang discuss, and then untain nyo ning pangpasahon ang inyong libro. Tungod kay naa na tanan sa libro, dili na siya kailangan isa-isa kun pa na to pag discuss sa inyo. Tungod kay college naman mo, pwede nga kamo na lang ang magbasa. Tungod kay manual man sa nisija. Anyway, I've taught you enough for the Cor Ad, or the institutional correction, the basics of institutional correction and the correctional administration nga kinahanglan ninyong mahibaw-an for this semester, and also that is anchored for the TOS of our board exam. So that's it.